Chapter 401. Call 2.0 Unleashed. There are still 2 chains left. That should hold, right? Northern sincerely hoped. But the whole room was beginning to tremble. 2 chains hung loose at opposite corners. The remaining 2 trembled slightly along with the entire room. Northern focused his attention on the being within the prism. His face was still bowed, and his hands were bound behind his back. Northern inspected more thoroughly for a couple of minutes. His brows creased as he saw the being's hands move. The figure slowly raised his head. His overflowing white hair did not reveal his face, but the curved horns on his forehead became visible. He grinned viciously and began to tense his muscles. Northern watched as cords of muscles squirmed across the figure's arms like living worms. Finally, with a forceful pull, the man shattered the golden band, freeing his hands. Northern felt his heart drop to his belly. "His hands are free," he muttered to himself, trembling. The figure looked at Northern indifferently. His sharp teeth were slightly open, hot breath coming from his mouth. He stood up slowly, massaging both wrists. "He's tall." Now that he was standing, Northern realized how much taller the real Call was compared to him. He was probably 7 feet tall at the very least, and Northern was barely 6 feet 1 inch. The difference in their heights was enormous. The figure's pristine white hair made Northern's own look ashen. It cascaded down his back to his waist. His body was clean and neat. His muscle tones aligned along every angle of his skin to reveal what could be almost referred to as a godly shape. Northern's mouth went dry as he watched the being's visage unfold before his eyes. "What is he?" Call neared the transparent wall of the prism and touched it softly, causing it to ripple with electricity. His eyes were still covered by his white, overflowing hair, but he didn't seem to be paying any attention to Northern, who was frozen in fear. He brandished a curved claw on his index finger and began to rip the transparent wall apart as if it were mere fabric. The wall crackled with electricity, as if it was screaming in protest as it was being torn downwards. But it did not repel with any force as it had when Kid Call was slammed into it. Call widened the tear with his hands and walked through it, into the white room. Nothing now barricaded him and Northern from each other. Northern had never felt his heart beat as fast as it was beating now. With 1,000 thoughts running helter-skelter in his head, he tried his best to calm himself. "I can beat him, I can win this. In the worst-case scenario, I'll just have to use chaos." Northern frowned and took back that thought. "I will win this without using chaos." The availability of an ability that could end things with a snap of the fingers was bound to place a limitation on one's growth. Because the person feels if push comes to shove, they will end things using that ability. Instead of pushing right through, they get shoved and pushed, and in the end, no substantial growth occurs. Limitations like this can be detrimental to one's growth. Not to mention the consequences that come with using chaos. Northern was not ready to use it unless he had figured out a way to fix the consequences. So he steeled himself even harder, determined to win without resorting to that. Such determination reflected in his azure eyes. Such a magnificent pair of oculi. "Ha!" The compliment made Northern frown. The next moment, before Northern could even blink, 2 sharp fingers were in front of his eyes. Northern, in that heated moment, felt a cold sensation crawl across his entire body. It was like his eyes were too late to register it, but his soul, resonating with his danger sense, screamed in fear of what was coming for him. Despite not using Chaos Eyes at the moment, Northern belatedly used the Void Force to block the attack. Call felt his hand stop right in front of Northern, as if it was being sucked by the space. He quickly leaped away, putting some distance between Northern and himself. Meanwhile, Northern touched his eyes to confirm if they were intact. "I didn't even see him. The Void Force wouldn't have activated if I hadn't upgraded Ellis's talent." He wiped his face with his hand and exhaled shakily. "This is bad news. This guy is bad news." His mind screamed in unrest. This was Call's true self, the real being that was sealed by the origins themselves. Northern grappled with the fact that he had to deal with such an entity, But at the same time, he didn't refute the reality of the situation. It was just so overwhelming, unbefitting of a mob character like him. All he had ever wanted was to keep a low profile and go home. He didn't see himself as a main character of any sort. And here I am, fighting the mini-boss. Raven is better suited for this position, I swear. Northern continued to stare at the being in front of him. Call had a look of shock on his face, his head slightly tilted. Both his fingers, which hadn't made it to Northern's eyes, were raised to eye level. But his hair still covered most of his face, so Northern couldn't tell what exactly the dude was looking at. However, his intuition said Call was certainly shocked that his attack didn't go through. Yes, that's right. As long as I have the void force of Limitless Void, I believe I'll be fine. The only thing to worry about was Call being faster than his danger sense could detect. But Northern didn't think that would happen anymore. Because from this moment, he didn't care how much it would hurt and cost. He was going to use Chaos Eyes throughout this battle. Chapter 402. Northern vs. Call 2.0 Part 1. Call moved again. This time, however, Northern's eyes followed through. It was almost instantaneous. Even though under Chaos Eyes, everything was slowed, Call was still fast. He looked like he was running at the usual speed of an actual athlete, which meant he would have been at least 10 times faster than what Northern was seeing. No wonder I couldn't even see him. Northern hurriedly raised the black sword as Call's claws swiped down. He deflected it in a spray of sparks. He shifted one leg forward and, from behind, slashed up an attack across Call's torso. But the sword cut through empty air, and Call softly landed on the ground, barefooted. Northern narrowed his eyes. I didn't think this would be easy, but what is it with that speed of his? This guy is even faster than Cal. Once again, Call moved, but not towards Northern. He went around. Northern, having seen the attack coming from behind thanks to Chaos Eyes, swiftly turned back just as Call's claws approached from different sides. He deflected both attacks quickly, his sword becoming a blur. Call's hair whipped against the air in that moment, revealing his yellow horizontal eyes. He breathed, still closed in on Northern. The air seemed to slow down for a moment. In the following beat, a furious series of attacks was unleashed upon Northern. The man's movement was outrageous. Northern felt as if multiple hands were instantaneously attacking him. Call's speed was beyond anything Northern had ever faced. Each swipe of his claws left a trail of afterimages. Chaos Eyes strained to keep up, capturing every minute detail in the decelerated world. Yet Call's attacks seemed to slip through the cracks of reality itself. With every block and parry, Northern's muscles burned. The reverberations of their clashes traveled up his arms, his grip tightening around the hilt of the black sword. Call's relentless barrage forced Northern to retreat, each step backward a dance of survival. If I don't change the flow, I'll be overwhelmed, Northern thought, his mind racing as fast as Call's movements. He needed to find an opening, however small, to turn the tide. But no matter how much he searched, there was none. He was using one compartment of Chaos Eyes to scrutinize Call, while the other 3 focused on detecting and tracing every bit of his attacks. There was no single opening that he found. All of the being's attacks were like a seamless flow, one bleeding into the other. Northern didn't even get the chance to breathe. His only option right now was to put distance between the two of them. If things continue like this, I am going to get tired quickly. He frowned, determination burning in his eyes. All 4 eyeballs of Chaos Eyes darted in several directions, simultaneously tracing every angle his claws were diving from. The only reason Northern could hold out this long against Call's speed of attack without a single scratch on his body was because of Chaos Eyes. However, he feared that the moment he withdrew a little bit, no matter how little it would be, Call's attack would hit before he got a chance to even teleport away from this position. Teleport was instantaneous. And so is this bastard's speed. Northern's eyes glinted with a soft blue light as an idea popped into his mind. But he did not give it away. He continued to block Call's series of strikes, that had been going on now for almost 2 minutes without pause. His sword moving as fast as Call's hand was. Swish! Call was forced to retreat as a clone of Northern plunged from behind, with a lightning-clothed sword. He flew over Northern and landed over 20 meters away with just a single leap, closer to the prism. Then he looked around. Behind Northern were 6 other Northerns, all lined up horizontally. But Call didn't seem fazed by it at all. He opened both hands, and black and red lightning began to appear within his grip. With a resounding sound, the lightning crackled for the last time and solidified into 2 blackish-red spears, each in his grips. Northern summoned the Soul Taker to one hand, gave Dark Mortal to the clone holding Stainless, and held both swords. Of course, Stainless was an Odachi slightly longer than Soul Taker, but he had his reason for this choice of weapon. He moved his head slightly, and all 5 clones darted to the front. All it took for Call to defeat them all was a second. Northern watched as Call's figure disappeared here and appeared there. Each time he did, he swiftly swirled the spears and hoisted them into Northern's clones. Then, with his final appearance closer to Northern, all 5 clones fell to the ground at the same time. However, what Call did not know was that 10 more were shooting towards him from behind. He dashed towards Northern, his form practically disappearing. Before he could reach Northern, however, his movement suddenly stopped. Northern's clones were holding his legs. 2 were pulling him back by his hair. 1 even sat on his shoulder, legs twisting around Call's neck. Northern grinned and, without wasting time, shot forward. Becoming a streak of blue light himself, he lashed out with his sword. Pang! Pang! Separating Call's spear apart, he twisted his hand to bring down his sword. But Call, in the nick of that moment, grinned. Northern did not complete that strike but instead disappeared and reappeared afar. Just like how it had happened with Call's first attack, it happened again. Barely a millisecond after landing, everything around Call went up in scarlet-red flames. Northern watched his clone evaporate with a terrified expression. Is that what would have happened to me? The moment the clones became smoke, Call was on the move again, but Northern did not seem fazed. Out of thin air, his clones popped out and began to jump into Call's way, but they barely slowed him down. His spears were almost like whips, blurring and slicing the clones with ease. Finally, Call reached Northern. Their weapons clashed and blurred against each other in a vicious and ear-splitting clangor of metal. Northern, mid-fight, opened his mouth and shouted, spewing forth a roar of black flames that consumed Call's face. He twisted in the air and smashed him away with a back kick. Call was sent rolling across the white expanse, finally coming to a stop. The black flame was still burning and didn't look like it was going to stop anytime soon. Call's head suddenly went up in red flames. The red danced with the black until the black could not be seen anymore. Then Call stood up as the red flame dissolved from his beautiful face and muttered, "Chaos flames?" Although weak, his voice rang with an almost touchable contempt. Chapter 403, Northern vs. Call 2.0 Part 2. What? How did you know that? Northern's voice quavered. He received no response. Instead, Call's image split through the air, catching Northern entirely off guard. There wasn't even time for the void force of limitless void to manifest. Before he realized what was happening, one of Call's spears scraped along the torso of the Night Terror armor. Northern staggered back. As usual, Night Terror armor to the rescue. However, Northern's face blanched as he glanced down at the area the spear had just grazed. A large scratch marred that section, as if the armor was being torn, yet the gash wasn't deep enough to penetrate it. Northern gritted his teeth. This marked the first time an attack had left a blemish on his supposedly indestructible armor. That single mark ignited a fierce anger within him. He felt the armor's smoothness and beauty had been tarnished by that solitary dent. Call wasn't about to wait around for Northern to lament a single injury to his armor. Mere moments after backing off, he was already hurtling towards Northern. But Northern stood ready. As Call neared, he unleashed a torrent of black flames that engulfed them both. "Do you never learn?" Call croaked in a froggy voice. Scarlet flames, reminiscent of burning blood, swirled between them alongside Northern's black inferno. The same phenomenon that had occurred with Call's head began anew. Northern, however, found himself locked in a fierce exchange of steel with Call. The surrounding air seared hot, causing his armor to scorch his body. The heat intensified, forcing him to keep his hands in constant motion lest Call's spear find purchase in his armor at the slightest opening. Northern, nonetheless, refused to ignore the heat's effect on him. He roared, a blend of frustration and ferocity. As he did, what little remained of the black flame began to burn deeper. Suddenly, the scarlet flames were being consumed once more. A notable change occurred within the black flame. It darkened, nearly matching the void-like darkness that spilled forth when Northern unleashed an enormous amount of his void energy. The blackness rivaled what one sees upon closing their eyes. Yet the flames fought back. Northern and Call continued exchanging blows within this vortex. Two spears against two swords, clashing and slicing through the air with diabolical intensity. Their hands left multiple afterimages as they darted simultaneously here and there within the flame vortex. Wherever Call shot towards, Northern materialized in front, countering. Whenever Northern attempted retreat, Call pressed forward with even greater force. They resembled two colossal sea waves crashing against each other, their combined might capable of cleaving the world in two. The white room creaked and shuddered with each clash of their weapons. Webbed cracks dented the ground beneath their movements. The vortex of flames followed their every step, one side red, one side black, each striving to consume the other. As Northern went on the offensive, the black portion of the vortex surged forward. When Call countered and cleverly switched to offense, the red section advanced. This pattern persisted throughout a significant portion of the battle, both combatants locked in a deadly dance, neither willing to yield. The conflict raged on, a symphony of steel and flame. Each of Northern's strikes grew more vicious than the last. His attacks and defenses were fearsome. The memory of the scratch on his armor seared into his mind, driving him to new heights of ferocity. He fought to prevent further dents in the magnificent armor and to avenge the single mar that existed. Call matched him blow for blow. Occasionally, his hair whipped in the wind, revealing his emotionless visage. The black flames surged, pushing back against the scarlet inferno. For a fleeting moment it seemed Northern might gain the upper hand. But Call remained relentless, his spears a blur of motion that kept Northern perpetually on the defensive. Their weapons clashed repeatedly, each impact sending shockwaves through the room. The remaining two chains groaned under the strain as more cracks spiderwebbed across the ground and walls with every exchange. Northern felt sweat beading on his brow beneath the Night Terror armor. The heat became unbearable, even through the supposedly impenetrable protection. He could feel his skin beginning to blister, yet he refused to yield. Call's spear found another opening, scoring another thin line across Northern's chest plate. The boy roared in frustration, unleashing a torrent of void energy that momentarily forced Call back. Call paused, staring at Northern with a stunned expression. His voice slithered out. First the chaos flame, now this familiar ominous energy. Who are you? Northern, however, didn't respond as expected. Instead, he declared, "Be prepared for what comes next." Northern let out a long breath and muttered, "The wind is on its way." As he moved, he whispered again, "Speed burst." Before Call could register anything, Northern had blown past him, carving a deep gash in his side. Golden liquid oozed from the wound. Call touched his blood and turned back. "Stupid human, you've been holding back all along." Northern shrugged his shoulders. "Not really. I possess a vast arsenal of abilities. I choose to maximize every battle I engage in through simple application of my skills. When that proves insufficient, I resort to more complex strategies." He dismissed both swords, and Grenger crackled to life instantaneously, showering itself in black-purplish sparks. Northern twirled the twin-bladed staff and glared, his eyes shimmering with azure light. "Here I come." Chapter 404. Recklessness, Part 1. Northern's declaration hung in the air for a heartbeat before he exploded into motion. The twin-bladed staff Grengor whirled in his hands, its black-purple sparks leaving trails of light in the air as he charged towards Call. The room seemed to blur around them as Northern's enhanced speed kicked in, his form becoming a streak of darkness. Call's eyes widened, his emotionless mask cracking for an instant as he raised his spears to defend. The clash of weapons rang out like thunder, reverberating through the white room. Northern pressed his advantage, each strike of Grengor coming faster than the last, forcing Call to give ground. "Impressive," Call grunted, his froggy voice strained as he parried blow after blow. "But your speed alone won't be enough." As if to prove his point, Call's form suddenly split into 3 identical images. Chaos eyes narrowed, easily following every single one of them. Tracking the real Call among the other ones was as easy as seeing with already opened eyes. He spun Grengor in a wide arc, dispelling the false images and forcing Call to leap back. "Your speed won't be enough," Northern mimicked, pressing forward. "And you think the best way to counter that is with illusions?" Call's eyes narrowed, a flicker of surprise crossing his features. He frowned a second later and swung his spear, more of a gesture than an attack. The scarlet flames surrounding Call intensified, coalescing into solid forms. Fiery constructs resembling twisted, demonic creatures emerged from the inferno, their eyes glowing with malevolent intent. They charged at Northern, forcing him to divide his attention. Northern gritted his teeth, Grengor becoming a blur as he fended off both Call and the fiery minions. Each time he struck down one of the constructs, it exploded in a shower of embers, only to reform moments later. "Damn it," Northern muttered, feeling the strain of using Windstride and speed burst every time he moved. "Crap. I need to bring this battle to an end." Like he had once done before, Northern released an outrageous amount of his void energy, unleashing a wave of darkness that swept through the room. The fire constructs wavered, their forms destabilizing as the void essence consumed them. Call stumbled back, his own flames flickering as they fought against the encroaching darkness. Taking advantage of the momentary reprieve, Northern focused his energy into Grengor. With a roar, Northern unleashed a flurry of strikes, each one leaving trails of void essence in its wake. Call's spears moved in a desperate defense, but even his inhuman speed wasn't enough. Northern's assault broke through, scoring hits across Call's body. Golden ichor flowed from a dozen wounds, sizzling as it hit the ground. But Call wasn't finished. He suddenly stopped and slammed his spears into the ground. The entire room shook, and pillars of scarlet flame erupted from the floor. Northern was forced to dodge and weave, appearing and disappearing in several locations in order to avoid the pillars. "You have come so far and impressed me well enough. Indeed, you are a worthy opponent," Call growled, his wounds already beginning to close. "But I have more important tasks at hand." The scarlet flames coalesced once more, this time forming a massive, serpentine dragon. Its eyes blazed with fury as it lunged at Northern, jaws wide and ready to devour him whole. Northern's eyes widened, but he stood his ground. At the last possible moment, pillars of black flames suddenly began to burst out of the ground. The dragon, however, dodged the pillars skillfully. Northern's eyes gleamed with enjoyment as he coalesced the black flames, forming a massive serpentine dragon with dark, hollow eyes. The dragon was as black as the night, filling the entire space with darkness as it blasted towards Call. Before it could get to Call's flame dragon crashed into it, both of them rolling to the side and twisting around each other. They thrashed around, black and red flames spilling around, until they crashed into one of the sturdy chains and broke its grip on the prism. The entire room trembled tremendously immediately this happened. This caused a worrisome look on Northern's face. But Call looked like he already knew what was happening. "I feel formless getting stronger." Northern could feel his ability to take on the form of anything becoming more vivid. He was glad but was not about to make this entire fight an experiment. So he opened his hand, shring. Call's face paled as a black lance appeared in Northern's hand. What is that?" Stuttering? "Oh dear." Finally some development. Northern grinned and slung the black lance at him like a javelin. Call blitzed away from where he was circling the room to the opposite side before coming to a stop. The moment Black Lance plunged into the white ground, it exploded and, like a massive invisible blade, it split the entire room into two from that point. Everything in the room was cleanly carved, even the last remaining chain. I tried to fill it with more void essence. He could never stop getting surprised at the kind of power Black Lance possessed. It was the strongest skill after Chaos. Hitting someone directly with Black Lance was a one-hit kill. Even Call seemed to have known that much, considering how he ran half the entire room to get away from it. The room trembled once again and was beginning to tilt. Both separated sides were slowly drifting away from each other, tilting downwards, about to fall into the pitch-black abyss below them. Northern had to find a way to keep himself from falling. He assumed that Call was going to do the same too. However, his eyes widened in surprise as he saw Call lunge towards him, ignoring the impending collapse of the space. The ferocity in Call's attack was palpable, his spears leaving trails of scarlet flame as they sliced through the air. With the room tilting and breaking apart, Northern had to act fast. He had no response but to match Call's recklessness with a crazier recklessness of his own. Chapter 405. Recklessness, Part 2. Northern's eyes blazed with determination as he met Call's charge head-on. The room continued to tilt and break apart around them, but both combatants seemed oblivious to the impending doom, focused solely on their clash. Grenger whirled in Northern's hands, its black-purple energy crackling as it met Call's fiery spears. The impact sent shockwaves through the crumbling space, causing more debris to rain down around them. As they exchanged blows, the floor beneath them began to give way. Northern felt the ground shift under his feet, but he didn't dare take his eyes off Call. Every strike, every parry, could be the difference between victory and defeat. Northern deflected two of Call's strikes, and before Call could dive in for a counterattack, he used travel and teleported to the other half of the white room, which was almost falling vertically downward. He didn't care. Immediately he appeared and tilted alongside it. His hands slung back and manifested the Black Lance. Northern launched the devastating attack at Call, who was already running backward the moment the Black Lance crackled to life. He ran on the wall and on the roof, surprisingly neglecting the effect of gravity. As the Black Lance plunged into the wall of the halved room, it punched a hole right through, sending numerous sharp waves to cleave several parts of the wall instantaneously. It wasn't as strong as the first one Northern used because he didn't apply as much void essence, but it was still a fearsome attack. Call landed on the part Northern was on, and even though the building was slowly plunging below, he didn't care. Northern was finding it hard to maintain stability in the vertical room. But Call absolutely ignored gravity and shot towards him. Northern's eyes widened as Call came for him. He plunged Grenger into the ground to serve as a hook point and materialized the Soul Taker. As Call hauled a terrifying slash from the side, Northern parried with the Soul Taker. As he parried, the other spear pivoted towards him. Northern narrowed his eyes, quickly moving his sword to block the other strike. One of his hands was tightly held on Grenger so he wouldn't fall. The other was using the Soul Taker to deflect Call's strikes. The tension was palpable as Northern fought to maintain his precarious position while fending off Call's relentless assault. The vertical room continued its descent into the abyss, adding an extra layer of chaos to their already intense battle. Northern's head ached, his mind searching for a way to turn the tide. He couldn't keep defending forever, not with gravity working against him and Call seemingly unaffected by their plummeting surroundings. As Call's spears clashed against Soul Taker once more, Northern made a split-second decision. He released his grip on Grenger, allowing himself to fall freely. Call's eyes widened in surprise, not expecting this sudden move. Using the momentum of his fall, Northern twisted his body and lashed out with a powerful kick, catching Call off guard. The impact sent the Inhuman warrior tumbling back, giving Northern a brief moment of respite. Northern didn't waste a second. As he fell, he activated 3 abilities at the same time, all for the purpose of unleashing one trump card. Speed Burst, Flash step, wind stride. His frame blurred with a bright blue light that enveloped his edges. It was as if Northern's body was glitching in that millisecond. Before he took off, everything suddenly stopped. Skill overtime has been activated. Northern's eyes widened. I suspected it would be amazing, but this is crazy. Time warp was not as effective as he wanted it to be. It wasn't that impressive to begin with, but it just encased him in the passage of time. Almost like travel but more complicated, just like he had used it with Cal. Make no mistake, it was an amazing ability. But since it was attributed to time, Northern wanted something more. So when overtime came, he was enthusiastic to try it out. However, the instructions were clear that with enough speed, he could override time. Northern didn't need to think hard and far on how to get enough speed. He just figured simultaneously using everything would give him enough speed. Not to say, he had the essence to support such overwhelming use of his abilities. Everything stopped in that instance. Northern couldn't help but look around with surprise. However, he had not much time. He phased through the debris around him and reappeared on a large chunk of falling wreckage, using it as a temporary platform. Then everything continued immediately. He landed on the platform. Cal narrowed his eyes, surprised to see Northern, who was falling a few seconds ago, now stabilized. "You're full of surprises, boy," Cal called out, his voice carrying over the rush of wind. He had already recovered, perched on another piece of debris like some fiery gargoyle. "But how long can you keep this up?" Northern gritted his teeth, knowing Cal had a point. The longer this battle dragged on, the more it favored his seemingly tireless opponent. He needed to end this, and fast. "Let's find out," Northern shouted back, channeling void essence into Soul Taker. This was the first time he was doing such. Since he had discovered he could recharge anytime, Northern was beginning to take a much more practical approach toward the application of his void essence. The blade hummed with power, dark energy crackling along its length. With a burst of speed, Northern launched himself from his perch, using smaller pieces of debris as stepping stones as he closed the distance to Cal. His almost supersonic speed made him appear as little more than a blur, leaving afterimages in his wake. Cal met his charge head-on, his spears wreathed in scarlet flame. The two warriors clashed in mid-air, their weapons meeting with explosive force. The impact sent them both flying apart, only to use nearby debris to launch themselves at each other again. Their battle became a deadly dance amidst the falling wreckage. Northern and Cal ricocheted from piece to piece, exchanging blows whenever they came close. Sparks flew with each clash of their weapons, briefly illuminating the darkness around them. As they fought, Northern began to notice something strange. The familiar feeling of his abilities was changing. His void essence seemed to be resonating with the surrounding darkness in a strange and uncomfortable way. Chapter 406. Fading Consciousness. Northern's senses heightened as he noticed the strange resonance between his void essence and the surrounding darkness. The uncomfortable feeling grew stronger with each passing moment, as if the very fabric of reality was shifting around them. But Northern was too preoccupied with saving his own life to spare a second thought to this feeling. Cal was stubborn till the very end, pummeling him endlessly as they fell freely through the darkness. His attacks came faster, spears leaving trails of scarlet flame that cut through the gloom. Northern parried and dodged, using every trick and ability at his disposal to stay alive. Despite it, the unease in his soul only got worse, ultimately trying so hard to divide his focus. The darkness around them seemed to thicken, almost palpable in its intensity. Northern gritted his teeth, refusing to be distracted. He channeled more void essence into Soul Taker, the blade pulsing with dark energy. As Cal lunged forward, Northern met his charge head-on. Their weapons clashed in a spectacular display of red and black sparks. The impact sent shockwaves through the falling debris around them, shattering smaller pieces into dust. Using the momentary distraction, Northern activated Travel once more, disappearing just as Cal's spear was about to make contact. He reappeared behind his opponent, Soul Taker already in motion. Call spun with inhuman speed, but not fast enough. Soul Taker's edge bit into his side, drawing a spray of golden ichor. The inhuman warrior hissed in pain but didn't falter, immediately countering with a vicious swipe of his spear. Northern barely managed to dodge, the tip of the spear grazing his cheek. He felt a sharp sting and warm blood trickled down his face, but there was no time to dwell on it. As they continued to fall through the endless darkness, trading blows and dodging attacks, Northern felt the unease getting stronger and harder to ignore. It was getting incredibly hard to not be distracted, and more importantly, the feeling was beginning to reveal itself, and for some reason, Northern felt like he was getting scared. Call? No, that can't be. Suddenly, the darkness around them began to shift and warp. Tendrils of darkness reached out, as if trying to grasp them. Northern's eyes widened as he realized that the darkness had suddenly taken shape. Call also seemed to be in as much shock as he was. Both combatants shot away from each other with force. But where could they even run to? As they flew away, another tendril curled out. Call was fast enough to outspeed one, leaving afterimages. Northern, before he could rebound for another race, his essence failed him in that moment. That millisecond was enough for the darkness to immediately clasp him within its tendrils. Call landed on falling debris and grinned viciously as he watched Northern get pulled deeper into the darkness. You damn bastard! Was this your plan the whole time? Rest, child. Your fate is sealed. That darkness is where you shall meet your end. Call leaped off the large chunk of stone. As he did, a large white feathery wing tore out of his back. He stumbled mid-air, but in the end, managed to fly away with just one wing on one side of his back. Northern watched Call fly away in pure disdain. The bastard could fly all the while, so this was a trap. Northern gritted his teeth as he thought of everything that had happened up to this point. Could it be that Call never expected to win, but this was his last resort? No. Northern clicked his tongue in denial. Call was strong, very strong. There was no way to decide the fate of the battle. Then he never planned to fight till the very end from the beginning, since he wanted to go and rescue his damn daddy. Northern groaned in pain as the tendrils of darkness wrapped harder around him. To make things worse, he was out of essence. Well, that should be a simple one. He thought and closed his eyes, attempting to enter the limitless void. However, Northern felt his entire body shiver and his eyes flew wide open to the same darkness. Ha! Much worse. The darkness began to tremble, vibrating rigorously. The tendrils began to spread around, consuming him. Northern tried to use all of his copied abilities, but each time he did so, he would feel his body vibrate and nothing would happen. It was like the darkness was overriding all of his abilities in a way. This should not be possible. Northern groaned as he tried to resist the hold of the darkness. However, with each ratio of strength he used to resist, the tendrils doubled and spread over his entire body, now slowly covering his face. Northern, with the chaos eyes, tried everything to get out of the darkness. Even though the majority of his body was submerged in darkness, he tried hard to fight it, but it was to no avail. As the darkness fully covered his face, Northern managed to tear one hand out of the darkness. He moved his thumb and index finger and was about to snap, but smaller tendrils stopped both fingers from meeting each other. Northern tried to push through, but a larger portion of the darkness surrounded his hands and folded them together as his face was fully covered. Without being able to do anything about it, Northern was swallowed into the darkness. He felt his consciousness slowly drift away. No matter how hard he tried to hold on to it, he could feel it slipping away. He tried several things, thoughts about moments from his old life, to his birth and the strangeness surrounding it. He thought of how his birth mother would look like. If it is even once, I would love to meet her. He thought of Shin and Aisha, thought of his little sister if she happens to really be one. I do hope they'll name her Silver. Then she'll get angry when she finds out I am the reason she was named Silver, and I'll tease her about it. His thought went low for a beat. I want to be around to protect her, to show her she has a strong, dependable big brother. He thought about everyone he had met, Annette, Ellis, Mr. Fluffy, Night Terror, Raven? Helena. Terence. He thought of Raven again. The fate of both of us is so ironic. I don't want to know why she became such a bad person. Northern felt like this was the end. And every single moment he had lived played before his eyes. Strangely, one of those moments predominantly stayed on his mind. Meeting those two beings before he was reincarnated. I wonder if I will be reincarnated again. His mind trembled. I don't want to die. With that, Northern couldn't hold on any longer. His consciousness slipped out of his hands and faded away. The vestige of void is resonating with the origination of void. Chapter 407. A Dream Come True. From above, it could be seen as a sea of pitch-black coloration, clashing against a couple of ants. But when a closer look is taken, more details sprawl into view. The monsters were enormous in numbers, clustered together, their eyes blazing with unreasonable fury. With savagery and madness, they clashed onto the small number of humans that opposed them. But the power wielded by those humans did not make this battle as unfair as anyone would have thought. With a sweep, ice cones the size of valleys spread around, freezing the monsters, both the ones in the air and the ones on land. With a clench of his fist, Ryan shattered the ice cones in a shower of crude blood. He did not pause and continued the attack. He was competent in close combat as much as he was in wide-area attacks. But his ability to focus prevailed more in wide-area attacks. He had the kind of power that could take on multiple enemies at once. And he was one of the major reasons why the scale of this battle was balanced. Another reason was the blonde-haired man. Now Zephyr's attire had changed. He now had armor plating like reddish scales, a tail curling out of his lower back. Instead of a sword, he was equipped with curved sharp claws on each end of his fingers. Large wings curved forward like another pair of claws, carrying him across the battlefield with efficient speed, while twisting and converging when needed to tear his opponents. He was like a whirlwind of destruction. Everywhere he darted, the monsters fell by his hand. He was fast and was like a red streak across the battlefield. But the most fearsome force in this war was the black vicious monster. Nothing but a creature born out of the terror of the night. Night terror was literally unseeable. All that the monster's eyes could follow was an unstoppable mass of darkness swirling around and taking lives with it. No matter how much they tried, they couldn't score one hit on it. Before they even got a chance to see what the darkness was, they had fallen by its blades. Ryu and Mew were like tiny blue and red threads, running through large monsters with two daggers, and cleaving hides as if they were tofu. Not to speak of their acrobatics and combination attacks, each of their onslaughts bled into each other. Reaching such a level without sharing a brain with the other person should be deemed impossible, but these two had achieved just that. Mew and Ryu were an inseparable team. Their synergy of attacks was already good enough, and ever since they stepped foot in this desolate land, they've only gotten better. Each of them had achieved the Maverick Soul rank at this point and were on the verge of breaking into transient rank, hence earning the title of sages. They were forces on their own lane. Added to this battlefield, they were a force to be reckoned with. Other notable fighters were Arlim and Vita. Arlim's body armor was fully equipped, even down to the helm that covered his head. He wielded a warhammer this time around and without a shield. His movements were minimal, but his attacks were groundbreaking and bone-crushing. All it took to deal with some monsters was a single swing of his hammer. Even when they failed to die from a single swing, they couldn't avoid being tossed away by the force of the attack. That was enough disruption. Vita and Annette were both at his left and right-hand sides, respectively, to take care of his leftovers. Vita was purely a martial arts user. She didn't use any weapons but had red clothes tied to her hands, bludgeoning monsters with mere hands and feet. Her fists would plunge into their bellies like a metal ball wrecking through bricks. Her talent was a body-strengthening ability, but because of her inadequate mastery and limitation of ranks, Vita could only strengthen a portion of her body. She mainly strengthened her forearm and legs, feet and thigh altogether. It was one of the reasons for her thick thighs and firm ass. Annette, even from her movement, one could tell she was extremely tired. But still, Embers of flames flickered on and off her body. The majority of her skin had reddened, and already scarred places were bleeding. Her face was covered in blood, but her eyes withheld a strong and fiery gaze, like that of a wounded predator that refuses to give up. Every punch she threw felt like her last. She felt her tendons and muscles ache, and every step was with throbbing pain. There was no part of her body that did not hurt, but she understood that the moment she stopped moving, it was the end for them all. Zephyr's deduction had turned out to be a trap. Upon entering the rift, everywhere was barren and empty. They began to navigate their way with the purpose of finding the Rift Guardian. But instead, they were ambushed by a sudden crowd of monsters that covered the entire landscape in an instant, turning day into night. Immediately, the team dove into a bloodbath, fighting every second for their dear lives without respite, a moment to catch their breath. Suddenly, the entire place trembled, and the monsters paused. So did all the drifters. They raised their heads to see a thin white line that suddenly drew across the sky. Light was shimmering out of it, and that was all. The scenery was foreboding. It made the skin of everyone present crawl with a different kind of fear. It was like they could all hear their heartbeat. What is this? What is going on? This is too ominous. Annette chimed to herself. Even Night Terror, the most fearsome, paused in his tracks, eyes fixated on the line, shoulders trembling slightly, and the darkness surrounding his feet slowly receding. Suddenly something fell into the rift, breaking out of the sky from another direction. The creature landed on the ground in a spray of dust and slowly stood, one wing flapping gently. He took a look at all of them with pathetic eyes and raised his gaze too. A malicious grin spread across his lips. Finally, the line has revealed itself. Khal giggled with trembling shoulders. His face radiated with genuine and sincere happiness. Hundreds of years, laboring, imprisoned, and struggling. His dream had finally come true. Chapter 408, Prince of Void. It was seamless, it was cold, it was unending. It was a shrewd feeling that couldn't even be sensed, because his senses were dead to begin with. But deep down in his subconscious, something could tell there was a feeling. That part of the brain that stays passively active after the entire brain goes to sleep was watching, but with more intensive attention than what would qualify as subconscious. The darkness was the space was the darkness. There was nothing in the space that wasn't darkness. And all that existed in this realm was just that, space and darkness. But it wasn't just any other darkness. It was like clothes. It was as deep as blindness. The night or shadow couldn't compare to this kind of darkness. It was the origin of nothingness where creation had started. Northern's subconscious watched a small orb of darkness separate itself from the space of darkness, whirling like a vortex and slowly growing bigger. Time passed slowly as every bit of this information unfolded. Twinkling lights formed, dancing slowly around the vast space of darkness. What started as a small orb of darkness, soon, after what felt like eternity, stretched into an enormous orb, a world, revolving away from the darkness. This series continued like a movie that Northern wasn't even aware he was watching. This process repeated itself time and time again, for what his subconscious probably counted for over 1,000 times. Eventually, the darkness stayed still, unmoving, pitch black and darker than even the deepest of shadows. The stillness continued, but essentially a change was happening. A change that couldn't be seen but could be felt. An innate understanding entered Northern's subconscious. It was like he could read the memory of the darkness itself, and that's how an identity of this darkness first formed in his head. Void. In the beginning, it existed alone. It was the source of everything. The void first started as a form of matter that did not emit, absorb, or reflect light, making it invisible and detectable through certain principles such as the slight movement of matter creation. It was essentially a vast space of preternatural energy form known as essence. This essence, however, did not stay pure to its origin. Each of the void's matter creations carried its essence. When they drifted further away from the void, the matter began to evolve in shapes and sizes. The void essence was now subjected to their evolution and its effects. Eventually, the endpoint and best of the evolution of the void essence was what was now addressed as soul essence. That was by this world. However, in some others they call it ether, some refer to it as mana. And this was a truth Northern's subconscious could grasp because the memory of the void was not just a memory. It was a record of space and time not limited at all in any form. Because those matters that drifted away from the void were worlds, birthed from this darkness, nurtured, and sent away to evolve and bloom. Each brought forth a creation native to its nature and style of cohabitation. And in the end, leaving the void to its own nature, nothingness. Something came from nothing. After a long time, eventually returns to nothing. However, the nothing that this particular something returned to was not the void. When matters drifted away to form worlds, because of how powerful their source was, they were powerful enough to determine their own concept and definition of something and nothing. Darkness came into being. Night came into being. The abyss came into being. And slowly but easily, the void itself became forgotten, until the Chaos Prince found it. However, in those eons of being forgotten, in desperation to change, to also evolve, the void gained a nature besides itself. Absorption. That's where the memory stopped, and it didn't even have records of its time with the Chaos Prince. How exactly the Chaos Prince found the void, or how he managed to absorb it and make it coexist with chaos. All that information was fragmented. But through this moment that the information registered in Northern's head. His body and soul were going through a fundamental change. No reason other than the fact that a seed of origin was being planted inside of him. He had assimilated with a tremendous amount of the void. An origination, and not just any origination. Void was the nothing that brought everything to be. While it may not be said to be a creation of chaos, it was an essential reason chaos could exist. Because if nothing had been created, then nothing would need to be destroyed. And now, Northern Soul was harboring both forces, one predominant to a tyrant, the other predominant to an origin. Thus his body was beginning to adapt to the changes of his soul. And that was possible because of a single attribute that he had. Formless. Another person, whether they had a soul core or not, would have their body shattered when they carry such quiddity of power. The Chaos Prince was special in body and soul. He might have had a soul core or might not have. But being a spawn of a tyrant and an origin would have given him an edge in absorbing void nonetheless. That edge for Northern was formless, an attribute that made him a demon of flexibility and change. This was the moment where Northern became a prince of void. His body became even more formidable than a sage's. Not to say this was merely the beginning. He was still at a rank where his soul needed to grow. The seed also needed to sprout and grow, to one day become a mighty tree. Northern's eyes slowly opened into the limitless void. He could tell instantly that there had been major changes in this place. First of all, the palace still looked the exact same way but larger. The pillars seemed to have multiplied. The throne still sat alone beyond the dancing black flames. But they were different. Their edges had a bluish hue. Although he was unaffected by it, Northern could feel the heat of the area. Moreover, he was standing naked amidst the palace. He looked down at his own body and didn't want to believe this was his body. I feel taller. His body was smoothly streamlined with muscles, abs. His chest was not enormous but was firm and sturdy. His shoulders were broad, which had never been the case all his life. Not to speak of his legs, they felt long and strong. Northern felt so light on his feet and he had not even taken a step. I feel like I can jump. As Northern leaped, in an attempt to jump, he flew away and plummeted through the roof of the Void Palace. He belatedly tried to redirect himself but drifted along the roof, scraping its metallic plates and crashing into one pillar. The pillar he crashed into another and then another and then another into another. Northern watched half of his beautiful palace wreck just because he tried to jump. He looked at his hands and legs in blank surprise. What the hell? Then he placed one hand on his chest. I can feel the void more vividly than I can feel chaos. The balance of chaos and void has been used. Does that mean I can use chaos ability now and not worry about anything? Wait. Northern paused, caressing his desert chin. Let's not rush into it. Right now, there's something more important that I must do. Northern closed his eyes and summoned the Night Terror armor. The plate of steel formed from black-blue ember of sparks and crawled all over his body. So did the helmet. Then Northern extended one hand and touched the space in front of him with a finger. Immediately the space in front of him began to shatter. Along with a large portion of void memories, also came an effective way to apply most of its abilities. Although it was the same principle that guided rift creation, Northern was just linking the space of his limitless void to wherever Call and the others were currently. And because Night Terror was there, he automatically knew where. Call's face contorted with intense pleasure as he watched the rift. It will take a little time, but your descent is here. The only person capable of stopping this has been captured by a vengeful darkness. His eyes ignited with sparks of adoration. My master, my Lord and Savior, I welcome you into the world again. This time, we shall together make this world your footstool. All of a sudden, the space began to crack right in front of all of them. In an open space where all of them could see, the atmosphere was tense. Everything was under a suspended silence. Even the monster was unmoving. The drifters looked like they had met their doom. The appearance of Call alone froze them all. A look at him, and even Zephyr could tell that this was a monster in a league he had never faced. It so happens that by that time also, Night Terror suddenly became immobile. Although for a different reason, this was when Northern's soul began to undergo a change. The appearance of a new rift inside this rift made all of their hearts beat fast. And they feared that it was going to be their end undoubtedly. Until a black-suited, four-eyed demon walked out of the rift. Chapter 409. The Mouthless Helot. All of them trembled at the sight of the new entrant, including Call. The presence of the being sent fear crawling down their spines. A primal sense of fear invaded their bodies and rendered them immobile. They all froze. Annette felt it too, the dark, ominous presence, but she knew very well who it was that had just stepped out of the rift. She recognized that armor with Northern. Ellis had told her about it. Moreover, there was a familiarity in his presence. But the ominous vibe emanating from him made no sense to her. Bottom line, she also couldn't dare to approach. She was even in a worse state than the others. The four-eyed demon drifted his eyes around, then stopped at Annette. He shook his head and said, his helmet folding down to his neck, "Oh, damn. You look so pathetic." Annette exhaled with immense relief the moment she realized her intuition had been right. "Northern, it really is you?" Northern folded his arms and smiled. "Yes, Annette, it really is me. I wouldn't abandon your lame ass." She scoffed. "I'm surprised. I never thought any of us meant anything to you." Northern looked away. "You're right, but Night Terror is here. I have to protect my subject, don't I?" His face became serious as his eyes caught sight of Call. Call's face trembled and twisted into a dark frown. "How's this possible? You should not be here," Call exclaimed. Northern shrugged and raised his head slightly. "Well, that's me for you, Call. Once I hate someone, I hate them to the end of the world. I hate you, Call. And I'm pretty sure we're not at the end of the world yet." Call growled. "That lousy sense of humor will do you no good." Northern lingered, looking at Call and nodding slightly. Then he said, "I have the luxury to use a sense of humor because I know there are only two things that will happen here today." Northern pointed his index finger at Call. "Your death," then pointed to the white line in the sky, "and his confinement." Call's lips curled maniacally, but on closer look, they trembled. "I have defeated you before, and I can do it again." Northern frowned in disbelief. "You defeated me before? When? You mean you tricked me and threw me into the darkness, hoping I'd never get out because you were certain I was going to defeat you?" Call's expression began to distort. "You make me laugh, you puny human. Good. I'm getting the reaction I want." Northern glared at him and raised his head in dominance. "Laugh while you still can, Call. The first thing I'll be ripping off is your mouth." "You insolent bastard, I dare you." Before he could finish, Northern vanished. Their eyes did not catch what happened until almost immediately before the wind of the vanishing blue. Northern swung a slap across Call's face, smashing away his jaw with just one hit. The lower part of Call's mouth was completely missing, golden ichor cascading down his neck. He tried to talk, but mouth failed him. Right where I needed it to be. Call frowned. For a couple of seconds, he seemed cocky, before his face crumbled. Northern chuckled evilly and said, "You're wondering, aren't you, why your magnificent regenerative ability isn't working?" He shrugged proudly with his hands. "I mean, I've seen how restorative those flames can be, but mine are stronger." He raised one hand. Small embers of black-blue flames danced around his gauntlet. "I coated my hand with my flames. That's probably what's inhibiting your healing. I don't have time to waste, Call. I'm really out of patience." Northern's expression became dour. Call glared at him, but Northern returned the gaze with a more blank yet serious look. He stretched his hand to touch Call, but the mouthless helot had disappeared, creating a large space between them. What Call didn't realize was that Northern was already behind him, with pitch black and blue-edged lightning flashing around his fist as he lunged it forward and smashed Call by the side. Shocked by the attack, Call staggered to quickly turn back and regain control, but was too slow. Northern was suddenly faster than his eyes could follow. He was helplessly left to Northern's merciless and continuous barrage of attacks, each one lashing out with trails of lightning. Call's body danced each time Northern's fist connected. The ground trembled and cracked. It was enough force to send him reeling back 100 miles, but he was pinned down by Northern. Every hit was instantaneous. When Northern finally delivered the last hit, an uppercut, Call flew into the air. His face, battered and broken, was unrecognizable. His body was bruised, broken, joints dislocated. He crashed into the ground like a broken doll and rolled away. Northern heaved a powerful breath and squinted his eyes. He took a step, and before the step touched the ground, he was right where Call had fallen, with the mortal blade raised high. "I have a surprise for you, Call. It's the sword you gave me when you made me a general." Call's eyes widened. Northern could see some semblance of emotion in them. "I'm glad you remember it. As a gesture of appreciation, I will kill you with this sword." Call's eyes widened vilely. He began to thrash his broken limbs in protest, but Northern's fist was upon his chest. He couldn't do much as it felt like the weight of the entire world was resting on his chest. He then stopped and glared into Northern's eyes. His eyes reddened. "Hate me more than that, Call. I don't care. If you do manage to live again, come for me. I'll give you death on a silver platter." He drove the sword into Call's neck and twisted it. The poor helot didn't even have a mouth to gaggle. Blood bubbled around the open wound of his jaw, and he finally died with widened eyes. "Congratulations, you have slain a catastrophic destroyer. You have gained 12 talent fragments. You have achieved a legendary feat. You have killed a sentinel. You have gained 1,000 talent fragments." Chapter 410, The Way Out. Northern turned to the rest with a bright, accommodating smile, trying not to seem so scary with the gruesome onyx sword in his hand. "Hey guys, I would appreciate it if you all stopped staring right now." All of them blinked and tried to look away from Northern. The moment Call entered the battlefield, they all thought it was going to be the end for them. Even Zephyr felt like this was the end of the road for him. He was already beginning to consider a way to betray them to save himself. Not that he owed them any loyalty to begin with. Northern then raised his eyes to the sky and stared for a couple of seconds before lowering them, worry crossing his face. Annette tiredly dragged herself towards him and glanced up. "What is that thing?" He looked at her. "What? You seem to know that guy just now, and I presume you know what this is." Northern lingered for a few moments, then sighed. "That thing is supposed to be the thin line between bloodshed and madness." Annette tilted her head a little bit. "What's that supposed to mean? What's in the thin line?" How exactly am I supposed to explain this?" Northern drifted away in silence for a couple of seconds, then opened his mouth again. "You know about Ul, right? The voice of the world?" "Yes." Put aside the voice of the world thing. I would call her a supreme existence in our world. She shrugged. Well, you are not entirely wrong, except that she is the world. Well, let's just say the creature in that place rivals Ul's power. It's an origin or a tyrant, hell, I don't know which, Northern said casually, no hint of dread or importance in his tone. Annette looked at him with a puzzled expression. That's impossible. Do you know what you are talking about? She paused and steadied her breathing. I would have said that if you didn't just mention those two words, origin and tyrants. Northern raised his brows. Oh, you know about that. Not explicitly, but while I was working with the government, I came across some files. She paused mid-sentence. I don't think now is the time for that explanation. What do we do about it? Northern looked back up and shook his head slightly. To be honest, I thought it would be possible to close it back, but I was wrong. Annette looked up and brought her bruised face to him, slightly tense. What do you mean you were wrong? If that thing comes down, would you be able to stand against it? Northern immediately looked at her, a grave seriousness on his face. No way, certainly not. I will die before I even get started. Northern couldn't tell why he was so certain, but it just felt like something he knew immediately she threw that question at him. Could it be because of the seed? Northern shrugged and shoved those thoughts aside. Right now, I have to figure out a way to stop him from coming. He tried with Chaos Eyes already, under the notion that he might be able to unrealistically sew the lines back, but Chaos Eyes picked up nothing. It was the first time the eyes were sort of useless. He was stuck with no way forward. To make things worse, all their gazes were resting on him, even though they tried to be discreet about it. They looked at him with suppressed hope, and Northern hated it. For a moment, he felt like Raven was the one standing at the viewpoint of those gazes. It made him feel bitter and want to just leave them. He frowned and turned away from them, looking up. Then he catapulted into the sky and stopped closer to the line, suspended in the air. He looked at the white line closely and looked down at the rest of the monsters. He flew back down and turned to Annette. The good thing is that the line is not wide enough for Cryos to pass through, but it's only a matter of time. Annette looked at him with one raised brow. What should we do? I need all of you to get out of this rift. She grimaced instantly. No, Northern. We are not going to abandon you. Northern's eyes stayed on her with a slightly ecstatic demeanor. Have you seen how beaten you look? Annette was silent, pressing her lips together. Still. Of course, you are not going to abandon me. Do I look like a hero or savior? Annette kept a straight expression for a beat. Then she smiled. You might not look like one, but you are one. Yeah, sure. He ignored her and turned to an empty space. Then he drew a straight line with flames, burning on the edges of his finger. The line slowly began to shatter the space, and soon, to everyone's disbelief, a rift gateway was forming right in front of their eyes. This will take everyone back to reality. Annette's mouth opened and closed slightly. Before she could speak again, Northern interjected. No questions. Just do as I asked. She swallowed her questions immediately and turned back to shout at others. Immediately, everyone began to move. The monsters regained their consciousness, along with the flaming fury in their eyes. While they wanted to defend themselves and fight back, Northern shouted, No one is to fight back. Just run like a coward. Judging by the facial expressions of some of them, they probably didn't like his choice of words. But he didn't care. Still, some of them looked at him with awe in their eyes. The monsters naturally pursued, but they were unable to get past Northern. It didn't matter how far away from Northern they were unable to pass him. He used the invisible void force of limitless void as a wall to stop them from moving forward. Spreading it to the end of the horizon while he allowed the humans passage, he denied the monsters. And he waited for everyone to be done. Annette, despite her tired state, made sure that everyone entered the rift. When they had all gone, she stopped and looked at Northern's back. What now? Northern looked at Night Terror, who had been silently standing beside him for a while now. Night Terror, you should know the realm I'm coming from. Enter that rift. It will lead you directly there and take Fluffy to the limitless void. Night Terror lowered his head and walked away, entering the rift. This left Annette and Northern alone in this rift. He sighed and muttered audibly, "Damn it. I'm about to lose a lot of my soul summons." Northern let out a grim sigh and closed his eyes. The flames of void spread instantaneously, turning the entire landscape black, and from within it, monsters with black and blue skin began to emerge. It seemed like their bodies had been consumed by void itself. They looked horrific, terrifying, and induced fear in the hearts of those who saw them. Annette's face contorted with more worry and confusion, but she asked no questions. Northern turned away and said to her, "Let's go." Annette looked at his face. "Are you sure? Won't he escape still? Even if he does, this rift will be sealed with its gateway broken." Chapter 4:11 Her Reflection. Towards the yard of the castle, a metallic clang could be heard as two fierce combatants ruthlessly clashed with each other. One wielded a rod, and the other fought with bare fists. His fists, however, were burning with a purple essence that looked like flames but had a more transparent body. Purely condensed essence. When a drifter focuses essence to one point, the essence is given a form and property, one closely related to their talent. Of course, one had to be a sage to do this. Helena's black rod also had the same property. Crackling with black lightning. You know, when I came here, she was naive. She really looked up to you and loved you for how well you taught her. I bet you didn't even blink while killing her. What would you have me do? She was dead in the brain. Do you know what that damn parasite does to people? You speak like you don't know. They met again in a flurry of sparks as Shade's fists clashed with her spear, as if metal were striking metal. Maybe you could have put a little more effort in than you did. Maybe you could have put a little more effort into everything. As he shouted, he threw her back with force and rushed towards her. His hands arched, hurling a terrifying punch towards her face. Helena quickly raised her spear to block, but the barrage continued, Shade's voice echoing in the yard, dripping with contempt and anger. You leave everything without trying. You're a lazy bone who sits in the comfort of judging other people. When things get uncomfortable for you, what do? Make up stupid excuses and run with your scrawny tail between your useless legs. Each statement was punctuated by a powerful blow that caused Helena's body to shake with fatigue and fear. Shade had an ability that drained essence. That was no secret. Although his true talent and any other things he could do were unknown. When Afcon needed you most, you turned on him. His energy-cloaked fist managed to slip through her rod and bludgeon her gut. She coughed up spit and felt her legs weaken. Shade pulled out his punch and, taking advantage of that split-second opportunity, drove a punch from the side, nailing a blow to her cheek and sending her tumbling away. Helena crashed against the wall. She rested on her rod and spat out the blood in her mouth before standing. Her usual primitive eyes had disappeared. They now looked unwillful. What? Don't tell me you're regretting it now, Shade said as he walked towards her. The essence flames that covered his hands had disappeared, but the confidence burning within him still shone brightly. Helena, on the other hand, seemed defeated in spirit. She frowned, her head bowed. You have no idea what you're talking about, Shade? Her voice crawled out shakily. You think I didn't try my best for Afcon? No, you didn't, he interrupted before she could go any further. You didn't try anything. Because when you try to help someone, when you really try to help someone, you don't stop trying until there's no need to try anymore. His voice grew more intense and powerful. He opened up to you, he trusted you, he regarded you. And you, of all people, made him feel like that was a great mistake. You have no idea how much damage that did to him. He was in the wrong, Shade. I warned him to stop, Helena shouted, her face breaking into anger. That's your excuse, Helena. But you forget one thing. When Afcon became the leader and we started working with Luengard Empire, we all made a silent covenant. We understood the side we were on and chose to live with it. You opting out, whatever the excuse may be, was treason. You're a traitor, Helena, he shouted. pointing to her face with a dark grimace burning in his eyes. Helena fixed her eyes on his for a few minutes, breathing heavily. Both of them locked gazes fiercely, hatred burning in their eyes. "Are you two done?" Helena and Shade quickly turned their heads to the opening corner of the yard. Zephyr, the blue-eyed handsome man, leaned away from the wall and looked at both of them, one after the other. He lingered before he opened his mouth to speak, facing Helena directly. "Shade is right about what he just said. It doesn't matter how much you try to justify your actions to yourself, Helena. You are a traitor. You betrayed all of us." He turned to Shade. "We don't have a lot of time. Get Elisai, and let's get out of here." Shade's face creased a little bit. "Is something wrong?" Zephyr had turned away to leave but stopped in his tracks, turned back and replied in a grim tone. "I said, Shade, get Elisai, and let's get out of here." "Roger that, Captain." He gave Helena one last furious glare and walked away. After he left, Zephyr glanced at Helena. "If you know what's best for you, find a way to remove yourself from all of this. I'm guessing things are about to climax around here. Nothing but destruction awaits." With that, he strutted away with purposeful steps. Helena stared at his back until he left the yard and leaned on her rod. "I wish I could, but I'm too involved already to remove myself from anything." Her eyes went despondent. "I don't want to be called a traitor anymore." Just as Zephyr and his people left the broken gate of Lothellowan Castle, the gaping rift shimmered once again. One of them was clad in ominous black armor. The other was a bruised lady with dried blood all over her body. She still managed to walk normally despite how tired she was. Immediately, Jessie saw who it was. She pulled herself up despite her exhaustion. Reinforcements had arrived, and she was being attended to by medics, mundane humans with knowledge of first aid. Among them was a prominent white-haired lady, directing them to do this and that. She had led the reinforcements here after Annette and her temporary team entered the rift. "My lord," she cried as she staggered towards him, falling at his feet as she got closer. "Oh, crap. This is so embarrassing." Northern, for a moment, regretted allowing Jessie to do as she pleased, worried about the impression her actions would give people. On the other hand, he was amazed at her open show of loyalty. Maybe it was high time he paid attention to her. Chapter 412, His Reflection. After emerging from the rift, Northern immediately closed the gateway. People began to move. It didn't matter which side they came from. Besides, the leaders of the opposing sides were suddenly nowhere to be found. Casualties were taken care of, and many could be seen leaning against the fallen bricks of the castle. Northern had gone inside what was left of the building, searching for How with Jessie following him like a loyal dog wagging her tail, despite being wounded. Northern paid her no obvious attention, but his mind was slowly beginning to drift in her favor. They entered a bunker-like door and went down the stairs, revealing an underground dungeon with a rotten, throat-cutting smell. Northern pinched his nose with his hand, calling with a muffled voice as he strolled forward. "How? How?" He continued forward, still calling, while glancing left and right before stopping. "I know you're here. What harm would it do you to just answer me?" Northern took his hand away from his nose as his face hardened and his voice dripped with seriousness. That split second, however, he was assaulted by such a strong smell that he quickly pinched his nose again and distorted his face in horror. "What the hell died here?" he cried. Finally, another voice echoed through the dungeon hallway. "Ah, finally. The kid decides to show himself." Northern stopped in front of the iron bars right after the one he was initially at. He didn't need how to talk. From the moment he stepped into this place, he had detected the man's presence. He just needed to know if he was in one piece, which was why he kept calling. "You look healthy, contrary to what I expected. And you look." How paused, sizing Northern up with almost glittering wide eyes before narrowing them back, trying to hide his surprise. "Grunt. You caused all of this." Northern reared his head back in a joking manner. Hey, be careful with all the accusations." How glared at him and turned his eyes to the person who came to stand behind him. He scoffed almost immediately. "What, you already have a wife now?" Northern frowned darkly. "Enough jokes. Let's get you out of here." "It's an iron bar made of." Northern pulled out one of the bars with his right hand. He stopped and looked at Hao with sincere curiosity. "What did you say?" Hao swallowed his words and spit. "Nothing. Let's get out of here." He thought to himself that metal is forged from the rocks of a dried volcano's belly. It should be indestructible. He swallowed a couple more times as he watched Northern rip the iron bars like he was tearing a rag cloth to shreds. Afterward, they rescued the other prisoners and left the building. The people on the surface had done most of the first aid for the wounded. The castle was in a state that made Gilbert's mouth bitter. He stared at it with a despondent expression on his face. Annette, spotting him from where she was resting, managed to push herself up and walk towards him with the help of a long wooden rod. She also stared at the gaping hole in the castle that had exploded earlier. "I thought I would be able to help the world for once." Annette grimaced at him, then calmed her facial features and let out a sigh. Gilbert's voice rang out before she could say anything. "Standing here like this, staring at this broken home, makes me reflect on my past choices." Annette interjected, "So many died today, drifters who could have excelled outside this disaster. Some I had to kill with my own hands, and some I watched fall beneath the teeth and claws of monsters." Her gaze hardened. "And this is all because of what Ruffsburg did." Gilbert's brows furrowed. "What Gilbert did, he did to save this place." "Shut up, Gilbert," Annette yelled, her voice laced with obvious disrespect. He glared at her, cut short of words by her sudden tone. If Ruffsburg wanted to help at all, he had the power to assemble sages and ascendants, and that's what he would have done. But I guarantee you, what that man had planned for these kids was pure wickedness. "Annette, keep your voice down," he said cautiously. People were already beginning to be drawn to them, and Annette didn't seem to care. To make it worse, Gilbert's cautious tone only made her angrier than she already was. Left to her, she would have screamed for all of them to know that Gilbert had a part to play in the destruction and suffering they had been caught in for the past year. But she suppressed the urge and stayed silent, breathing steadily with a furious glare at the man. Then a menacing grin spread across her face as she saw Northern walk out of the building. She leaned closer to Gilbert and whispered to him, "Your doom marches towards you with anguish and terror. I bet he'll make your life and Ruffsburg's miserable." After that, she limped forward on the stick to meet Northern. Gilbert watched Northern from where he stood. At some point, when their eyes met, he felt his gaze waver. Whether it was out of fear or simply intimidation, he didn't know. The last time he saw Northern, he was sure he could defeat him, even though he was pretty cocky. But now, Gilbert wasn't sure of anything. Northern looked less cocky and more humble, which made reading him even harder than before. Moreover, news had spread quickly that he was the master of Night Terror. Northern had been playing all of them during the event where Night Terror was slaying all their monsters. That event, along with Raven's absence, drastically led to the changes that happened to Lotheloin Stronghold. With an ocean of dead monsters available, people began to fend for themselves. The settlement outside the castle spread into the decrepit cities. The need for the party leaders reduced. Braham threw a tantrum, which he tried to honor by hunting Night Terror, but it was futile. Annette started acting strangely, which ultimately led to her drifting away from his grasp and watch. Braham abandoned them when he saw they couldn't be of any good use and brought in soldiers from Sloria Stronghold. It turned out he had been feeding them information for a while, and also stealing Hao's non-bound items to Sloria, where a specialist who could unlink items from the soul existed. These items were traded with Luingard Empire and were how Braham and Afcon were buying their way home. All this he knew because Ryu and Mew, expert spies, had been tailing Braham since before all of this started. He knew of Braham's tendency to betray them, but the guy's importance left them no choice. And now he regretted all of it. Towards Northern, he didn't know whether to be grateful or angry. But one thing was clear in his feelings. Night Terror was powerful, and if Northern had to defeat such a monster to tame it, then he was much more powerful than Gilbert had thought. Chapter 413. Raven's Return, Part 1. Late in the night, Northern's eyes slowly opened. Using just a fraction of what the void could do came with overwhelming tiredness. His void essence was now limitless, but it placed a huge burden on his stamina. Hence the reason why Northern slept from daybreak around 5 a.m. till 11 p.m. Of course, while he was asleep, a lot of things had transpired. Northern sluggishly stood from the bed, which was supposedly Annette's. He strutted towards the door. When he got out, his movement became less sluggish. It was almost like his body easily transitioned to suit the reality of the current situation. Even though milliseconds ago, he felt very tired and as if the sleep fixed nothing. Northern nodded at everyone outside, surprised as their eyes glittered at him. It made him want to shrink. Finally finding Ellis bent in front of a fire, skewering meat, he bent down also and stared into the flames. Ellis, who was already consumed in what he was doing, belatedly looked to the side and almost staggered to his butt. However, Northern saved him and pulled him back to a stabilized position. Should you really be outside right now? It's kind of cold. Ellis had sustained a lot of injuries, of course, just like everyone else. And with a useful resource like Braham not available, recovery had been tremendously slow. I'm hungry, and you have been sleeping all day. You had to eat if you wake up, Ellis replied, staring into the flickering flames beneath the lap of steak. Northern downturned his lips and flashed a barely noticed smile. If you wanted to impress me, it's not working. Why would anyone want to impress you? Ouch! Ellis chuckled a bit, and slowly, his expression became serious as he stared into the fire once more. After a breath, Northern heard his voice. You saved all of us. Vida told me what happened. Northern cocked his head. Vida? Ellis frowned in disbelief. You don't know Vida? Am I supposed to? Annette's protégée, the dark-skinned girl with braids. Strong, really strong. She was in the rift, and she saw you defeat a being they could barely stand in front of. Not to say you defeated it so easily, it didn't cost you a sweat. Well, at least that was how she put it. Ellis sounded a little bit more elated than the explanation needed, almost seemed vexed that Northern didn't know this person. The energy he put into describing her also warranted special attention. Northern observed him with squinted eyes. At that point, Ellis began to get uncomfortable. What? Nothing, Northern responded with a dubious grin. Ellis looked away for a couple of seconds and looked back, but Northern's face was still smeared with that grin. Stop it. Stop what? Whatever you are doing. My heart only belongs to Lady Raven. Northern suddenly frowned. He was silent for a couple of seconds. Then he asked, Speaking of Raven, have you heard anything about her? Ellis responded with a heavy heart. No, Helena and the Oracle left this morning to find her, but none of them have returned. Northern's gaze drifted deeper into the fire. I see. Silence ensued between the two of them, with the soft crackling of the flames and wood beneath the skewering meat being the only sound that could be heard. Not long after, Ellis looked at Northern with compassion alight in his eyes. Can't you go too? And why exactly would I do that? Northern's response was firm and resolute, as was his expression. Ellis' compassion shattered into a frown as he pulled his head back and turned to the fire. You are wicked. You have no idea what you are talking about, Ellis. Besides, Raven is strong. She'll make it back alive. He removed the meat from the fire and easily tore apart a large portion of it. Ellis looked at him, his expression lifted. Really, you think so? His voice danced. Northern tore a chunk of the meat into his mouth and stood up. Looking down at Ellis, he responded while munching, No, I just said that to make you feel better. He walked away, and Ellis glared viciously at his back, but could in the end do nothing but eat the small portion of meat that had been left for him. As Northern walked amidst the crowd, he realized something. The shelter seems more populated than the last time. He remembered very well that Terence had tended to the wounded of both sides and demanded that they all be brought in together. That darned goody shoes. Northern didn't want to deal with any headache after saving their asses from call. So he gave in to his tiredness and went to sleep. Now that he was awake, he also didn't want to deal with any headache. So he planned to just rest a little bit more and figure out a way into Lewengard and finally go home. He stopped in his tracks while thinking about it. Am I sure I really want to go to Lewengard? With what Jesai had said to him, things sounded like he would be welcomed with open arms, considering that the Emperor of Lewengard right now is his mother's brother, his uncle. But there were certain underlying complications. Jesai is a knight that was sent to kill him but not only failed in her mission but also betrayed the Empire. There's a high chance that the Lewengard Empire is involved in whatever Ruffsburg has been playing in the Central Plains. In fact, Northern was of the opinion that Ruffsburg created the rifts. If I can do it, that means it's possible. There's no telling that he can't. All these complications put together would put him in a tough spot should there be a need to choose anything from anything at all. When Northern thought about the possibility of that part, he suddenly felt distressed and uncomfortable. The thought felt foreboding. He exhaled and raised his head, immediately smacking his lips, as he looked forward to see the people that were entering into the shelter. Damn it! The meat suddenly doesn't taste good anymore. Chapter 414. Raven's Return, Part 2. Hey! Northern waved his hand briefly as she stopped in front of him. Hey, Northern. He observed her for a couple of seconds. Raven was, well, at the very least, her armor was beaten and battered, with crude lacerations in several areas. Blood had dried on her skin here and there, even on her face. But underneath that dried blood was smooth ivory skin that remained flawless. It shocked Northern. I don't know if I should say you look bad, because you look bad, but I'm not sure you really look bad. Raven smiled softly and raised her eyes to meet his. You've grown taller. She paused and waited before adding. And stronger. In such a short time too. Did you finally become a master? Northern chuckled dismissively. Who knows, did I? Helena and Terence stared at him unceremoniously. They looked like they had greater things to worry about. Northern observed both their expressions and decided to ignore them, bringing his focus back to Raven. I'm guessing the fact that you're here means Afcon is dead, and your plan will be moving to its next phase. Raven nodded with determination in her eyes and said, although, I owe you my sincere gratitude. All 4 rifts suddenly closed. Northern frowned for a bit, then remembered, right, I force-closed all of them to keep cryos from going out through any leakage. He deliberately intensified his frown and directed it at her. If you feel any bit of sincere gratitude, then leave me out of your plan going forward. He made it clear to her and turned away. However, Helena's voice stopped him in his tracks. All she's been doing, she's only done for the good of everyone. She neglected her own self and... Helena, Terence softly called, stopping Helena from saying more. Raven doesn't want anyone to know, she whispered. This caused Helena to eat back her words and grind her teeth. You are selfish, Northern. You have no idea how much this girl is suffering to make everyone leave this damned continent. Northern felt his blood boil. Like all the resentment and malice he'd sealed away from the past suddenly began to break free. Northern clenched his fist, grinding his teeth. He swiftly turned around. Don't you dare! Raven's eyes widened and then narrowed a second later. She quickly cried out, Northern, stop! Don't you dare speak to me about selfishness! Before Raven could get in the way, Northern streaked past her in a blue light. His fist connected with Helena's chest. Her eyes belatedly widened. She felt her entire body break from the electricity before she was sent toppling away, crashing into the wooden gate and out of the shelter. Everyone who was busy with their own tasks was immediately distracted by the commotion. Northern's fist was smoking. Raven's eyes were still wide open. He moved faster than I could even react. This isn't just regular speed. It makes no sense. Her mind felt heavy and tense at the same time, overwhelmed by what she had just experienced. Terence, on the other hand, didn't look too surprised. She bit down on her lower lip, trying hard to hold something in. Northern exhaled and commented, Now that felt so good. He turned to Raven. Raven, Let me make this clear to you. You are suffering for what you chose to do, not for what anyone imposed on you. You had a choice to choose yourself, but you continually chose other people at the expense of yourself. Now, I don't know the details of your suffering, but it's your decision, and I believe that's a form of selfishness in and of itself. I'm doing what's best for myself, so I'd appreciate it if you stayed away from me. He turned and walked away but stopped after 3 steps, turned back to Raven and pointed at Helena. And please stay away from that person. Next time, I can't guarantee her safety. Raven nodded and watched him walk away. Her head drifted to Terence almost immediately after Northern left their sight. You knew. Terence nodded with a despondent look in her eyes. Sort of. Raven narrowed her eyes. I don't understand. I'm sorry, Light. I can't tell you. Raven smiled and nodded. She was silent for a few seconds. Then she asked again, Is he stronger than I am? Is he a master? Terence shook her head. To which? Raven pressed. Terence stared sternly into her eyes and called her name blankly. Raven. Fine, tend to Helena. I'll find my way to Annette. No need to find your way to me. With that commotion just now, there's no way I wouldn't find my way here. Annette cut out of the crowd of people, who were slowly returning to their business, boiling meat and jesting amongst each other. It was a sort of cheerful atmosphere, even though it was midnight. So, you killed Afcon? Annette asked with a joyless face. Her arms were bandaged, and one part of her face and eyes, leaving only her functioning eye exposed. Raven nodded. I had no choice. Calm down, kid. I'm not judging you. Come with me. She led Raven into the shelter, cutting through the passageway automatically created by the way some people position themselves on the left and right, leaving a little space in between. Annette asked as they walked forward, Do you have anything you want to tell me? The Empire's forces were slaughtered. Annette raised a brow. Indeed, Zephyr had mentioned they had backup from the Empire. But slaughtered? How?
I'm guessing monsters.
Only that it was a one-sided massacre. Annette paused in her tracks, her eyes waning with confusion and a little fright. That is impossible. They are the Empire's forces. Unless they met something incredibly powerful, it is. Anyway, I feel things need to pick up pace because of this new development. Raven paused and looked deeply into Annette's eyes. The Empire will send stronger forces that I am sure of. They've had a lot of recent failures in trying to exterminate things. I am sure the next set of knights they'll send will be unbeatable. We need to move quickly. Annette's expression was blank for a while, her eyes unmoving as she dove deep into her thoughts. Then she finally laid her gaze on Raven, looking at her suspiciously before speaking. I understand your point, but what things exactly are you talking about? Chapter 415. He is only a nomad rank drifter. After Annette's question, Raven was silent, observing everyone around her before returning her eyes to Annette. Can we go somewhere more? Oh, I understand, Annette responded before she got to finish. If there was anything that could be noted in the way Annette treated Raven, it was respect, which was quite out of place with what has been known of the Vermilion drunkard so far. She respected and sort of adored Raven. At the same time, she envied and distrusted her. Nonetheless, Annette knew how capable Raven was, in more than one aspect. Her foresight even outdid many pronounced master planners that she knew. Not to speak of her extraordinary relationship with the Oracle. Terence had always been somewhat unapproachable by a lot, until Raven got in the picture. A lot fell in place, and she was the grease easing all friction, making every single mechanism flow with each other in perfect synchronization. A testament to that was how the stronghold quickly fell apart immediately after she left. Eventually, Raven and Annette entered the main house of the shelter. Immediately they got in, Annette ordered everyone out, turned to Raven, and leaned on the table, her arms folded. So, Raven took a moment, her expression indifferent despite the slight tension Annette's seriousness injected into the air. We need to go to Lewingard. Annette raised a brow. Well, she only has one right now. Are you insane? Go to Lewingard? Didn't you say they will be coming for us right now? Why the hell would we go to them when we should be preparing to withstand them? And then what? A small frown laced Raven's brows as she continued. Until when before we break? We are trapped. Rather than fighting the Luengard Empire, the only thing we should be concerning ourselves with right now is escaping. Annette unfolded her hands, then leaned them on the table, breathing out before responding. So, what are you insinuating? Escaping is a pipe dream. I thought we all have understood that. We will need a miracle if we are to leave. Closing the remaining 3 cardinal rifts seemed like a pipe dream too, some time ago. Annette sighed. Northern. Her gaze fell on the floor for a couple of seconds. Then she raised her head and inquired, I suppose you have a plan of some sort? Raven brought out the small bottle with her and said, the leaders of Lothelloin and Sloria were looking for this as an advantage over the monster. This teardrop is enough to cover this entire continent in water. It'll destroy everything. Can you imagine the level of disaster it will cause within the tall walls of Luengard? Annette's eyes widened. Raven? Her voice shook. You want to destroy a whole nation because of ships? Raven interrupted, repeating again. Because of ships. They have sea and air ships that will take us out of here. This flood will give us the edge we need to steal the ships and sail away while they deal with the flood. Annette was silent for a couple of minutes, seriously thinking about what Raven said. After a while, her voice came forth. I understand your plan. She paused for a while and sighed again. Raven, you do realize that innocent lives will be lost. People's livelihoods will be affected. Raven was indifferent despite what Annette had just said. She responded with no emotion in her tone. We need to make a choice of living, don't we? Annette looked at her face, shocked and not surprised at the same time. There was a dangerous intensity of resolve that burned in her eyes, one very dangerous. Annette slapped her face in exclamation and sighed yet again. Oh my Eldek, you are one hell of a brutal girl. Did you ever have the opportunity to be a kid? Raven did not respond to her and just stared indifferently. Annette stared at the young lady's fist and narrowed her eyes in suspicion. Let me guess, that's not all? Raven shook her head. No, it's not. Annette sighed again. I feel like I might end up dying from so much heavy breath. Speak. It's about Northern. Annette's face immediately creased together. What about Northern? Her voice dripped with a kind of fierceness that made Raven want to think 1,000 times before saying what she intended to say. But it was Raven. She didn't care much. She never did. She spoke either way, unaffected by Annette's intimidation. We need him if this will work. Annette's face stayed glued to Raven's with all seriousness. And what exactly do you need him for? I'm guessing Northern can enter Luengard easily. Annette rubbed her chin. He does have a knight of Luengard following him, which I don't know the details of and neither do I need to know. But why do you believe he can enter Luengard easily? Honestly, I don't know, but Northern is now strong. I don't think entering without fuss should be difficult for him. Annette shrugged. You are right, actually. In a way, you're right. She paused and looked at Raven. But why would you come to me for that? You can just go to Northern directly and ask him to help you. This involves him too, after all. Raven at that point looked down with somber eyes. Her expression caught Annette by surprise. This is the first time she changed expression, and it's about Northern? I smell something. I'm probably the person Northern hates most in the world right now. Raven raised her head with determination blazing even fiercer in her eyes. Oh, you, incurring Northern's hatred. That can't be good. Is that what that commotion outside was about? Raven nodded. Annette sighed yet again and folded her arms while leaning away from the table. Still, me going to Northern is inappropriate. He's different now. Even every second with him while he was sleeping, I felt like I needed to be careful or I could cease to exist. I can't imagine or tell what will happen if I pick up on a topic he hates. Raven stared into Annette's eyes. What exactly happened? Annette shrugged. I also don't know. All I know is that he got really strong. I'm a savant now, and I'm pretty sure that Northern can kill me before I even realize I'm dying. He's only a nomad. Annette pointed at Raven, which is exactly the scariest part of all of this. Raven? He is only a nomad rank drifter. Chapter 416. Luingard Empire, Part 1. Northern got some more sleep after eating and giving Raven a piece of his mind. The morning was bright. The illuminations of the day star were barricaded by white clouds, and yet they still managed to bathe every single place in an ethereal wash of radiance. When Northern woke up, a lot of people were still asleep. Jessie was standing vigilant in front of his shelter, which he had warned her before going to bed not to do. She greeted him with one knee down, showing nothing but sincere and utmost respect the moment he stepped out. If Northern was ever second-guessing his identity to begin with, he'd probably have had to believe by now. But of course, Northern did not second-guess at all. He just wished he could run away from the reality. Not because it wasn't an interesting upgrade to his person, but because of the complications that were bound to come with it. Shin and Aisha indeed knew that he was adopted, but it's not like they expect him to know. That was not the hardest part, however. What about the changes that would come with confronting that truth? So much had happened and so much was yet to happen still. The thought of it all was slightly overwhelming. But I am ready for all that would come. Northern stood in front of his shelter and stared into the sky. Jessie was behind him. My lord, it's Northern. No, I would never address you with such a mediocre title. Northern raised a brow. You do realize that mediocre title is my name. It's unbefitting to be called a name. Whoever gave it to you deserves death. Northern's eyes drew upwards lazily. That would be my father, I guess. Jessie hurriedly stared with wide eyes. Your father? Your father is the Emperor of Reamgard. Northern looked at her with a soft and sweet smile giving life to his entire face. I don't even know who the hell that is. Why would I call him my father? Jessie, there's a lot of complications that came with my birth. Now that I remember, I think people died trying to protect me. Do you have any idea why that could be? Jessie's eyes went low for a moment. Northern couldn't help but notice the hesitation in her eyes. She knows something. Northern exhaled and looked around, taking watch of the people that just slept here and there, uncaring of the dangers they exposed themselves to. You don't have to tell me if you don't want to. I will find out anyway. Jessie clenched her hands and spoke. It's not that I don't want to. Her voice trembled. I don't know much about it. What I know are fragments of gossip. I don't want to say something wrong and confuse you. Northern looked at her, frowned a little bit, released the frown and asked, My mother, what is she like? Jessie allowed a delighted smile and started. She is the most beautiful human I believe exists. Not just her physical beauty but her heart. It's so pure and flawless. She's gentle, kind, loving, caring. Even to the lowest of soldiers, she is the same. She knows all our names. She lets us try her cake. Sometimes many mistake her for a commoner, because that's where you find her a lot of times. On the farm, in the smithy. Jessie smiled. Did I even mention that she's multi-talented? She's not a drifter, of course, but she's talented in many other mundane works. She makes her own kitchen knives. She makes clothes. She even mends the soldiers' armors in the smithy. Northern chuckled, feeling a heavy weight drop on his chest. She sounds like she's going to be a lot to handle. Jessie's voice reverberated with elation as she spoke on. She's very stubborn and doesn't listen to anyone. Even her own brother, who is the Emperor, cannot handle her. Yeah, a lot indeed. Northern chuckled again, his face slowly drying out. But I would love to know her. You should. Jessie corroborated. Northern frowned slightly and asked, I have a question, Jessie. My lord, do ask away. Northern scrunched up his eyes as he asked, The Emperor of Luingard, what is he like? Jessie looked at Northern in confusion. The Emperor of Luingard is not your father. I'm pretty sure. Stop it, Jessie. Northern's voice rang with a stern rigidity. He continued, You and I know we have not visited a lot of things that have to do with the Luingard Empire and the strange relationship they have with Sloria. Why you guys didn't extend a helping hand 30 years ago, and why you still wouldn't but would send out troops to destroy us. His voice rang out with almost the thickness of a vicious growl. If you want to be faithful to me or serve me in any possible way, then you should be willing to tell me all. Jessie lowered her head like a defeated puppy. I will tell you all, everything. But I am merely a cannon fodder. I don't know anything to make a difference. Her breath was shaky as she tried inhaling and exhaling. She glanced quickly at Northern's eyes and spoke with her eyes down. The Emperor of Luengard has 3 sons. His sons, however, are monsters. They are power-hungry freaks who are not just in competition with one another but even with their own father. To make it worse, all 3 of them are ascendants, while their father was a paragon. Of course, the distance between paragons and ascendants is worlds apart, so they didn't even dare. But a particular one of them, Prince Andrei, began to get out of hand. In order to stop Prince Andrei from gaining more allies than needed, the emperor shut the walls of the city. The decision of the empire to not interfere in other nations' business also had something to do with the 3 princes. The emperor believed if they were given any slight chance, they would overthrow him. Northern frowned at her. You're telling me all of this happened 30 years ago? 30 years ago. Shouldn't the princes be barely born or at least young? The princes are not young. Northern narrowed his eyes, puzzled. Sorry. And the emperor is how old exactly? Jessie lingered before responding. Quite old but looks nothing like it. Northern chuckled. And my mother? Your mother is in her late 40s, if I count well. The princes are older than my mother. Who should be the emperor's younger sister? Jessie sighed. It's a bit difficult to explain, but I will try my best to explain to you the family tree and how it affects their age. Chapter 417. Luengard Empire, Part 2. The emperor before the current emperor, who is the 3rd emperor of Luengard, had 2 wives. One he married when he was young and strong. This one gave birth to our current emperor and his brothers. When the former emperor's soul reached the evanescent rank, his body was renewed. He became young once again, filled with youthful vigor. He took another wife from a special tribe. This tribe is known for their blue eyes and white hair. They are said to be originally from the northern continent, but half of them migrated. And this tribe has a prophecy of a child who can see all things. A male child that would be born with the ability to see the fabrics of reality. Of course, all of these were just old tales. She chuckled a little, looking at Northern as she continued. When the former emperor took a wife from this tribe, the current emperor was 30 years old. The former emperor was close to his 80s. Of course, being a new paragon, he looked much younger. So eventually your mother and her twin brother were given birth to. Northern raised his brows, surprised. My mother had a twin brother? According to what I heard, he was killed by one of the current emperor's brothers. Let me guess, the current emperor was also a murderer of his brothers. Jessie let out gently. It's a really cruel destiny. And the kind I'm supposed to join? Northern chuckled inwardly. I doubt there's anything good to being a prince then. He looked forward with an intense gaze and asked Jessie. So, that is what explains the large age difference between my mother and her brother. Do you happen to know how my mother married the Emperor of Riemgard, and why she isn't in Riemgard right now? Jessie shook her head and said, I have no idea, but I did know it was a marriage of convenience. She looked like she wanted to say more. Jessie, I am ready to hear whatever it is you intend to say, so you better not hold anything back from me. She bit her lower lip and spoke. I don't know the kind of life your mother lived in Riemgard, but it seemed to have broken her. Then losing her only child made her lose all the spirit she used to have. Now, all she does is sit by the window and stare at the roofs of the city. Honestly, I wish she never went to Riemgard. Northern looked down for a moment. Of course, I was assassinated. She must have thought that. Jessie looked at him with a mixture of emotions rolling across her face. What? Northern questioned as he stared back. I don't know, you seem to be taking all of this well. Is that not a good thing? You want me to be crying and broken like a kid? Jessie shrugged her shoulders. You are a kid. You're not even 18. Northern smiled. I presume I am. Then he slumped his shoulders, narrowed his eyes, was silent for a couple of minutes, then called. Jessi. Yes, my lord. Let's say the prophecy, this old tale is true. That means it is applicable to my mom, right? Jessi ruminated deeply for a couple of heartbeats before responding. I don't know how exactly to answer that question. Your mother's tribe had long moved on without her. But I guess it wouldn't have been out of place. But there was nothing special about her twin brother. If anything, my lady even thinks he had it coming. Wow, quite cruel. Jessi smiled. Doesn't mean she wouldn't have been hurt to death. It's fine. Northern folded his arms. People were beginning to stand up and the radiance of light burned fiercer. You should get some rest. I doubt if you got any at all. No, my lord, I can still. Jessi, he shunned. Go get some rest. You'll need it. Yes, my lord. She bowed in response and walked away. After Jessi walked into the room, Northern sighed and said to the air, Why don't you just approach me already? After a couple of seconds, Annette walked towards him from nowhere, grinning too much. It wasn't like I was scared of approaching you or something. I just had to give you time to talk to your, Who is she again? Northern rolled his eyes. You know who that is? She's Jessi. Oh, right, Jessi. And how do you know again? I'd prefer it if you just came straight with the question. This is tiring. What exactly do you want? Annette's grin reduced. Instead, she seriously looked at Northern and looked at the horizon. Do you want to walk? Northern looked at her with jeer. Are you feeling melancholy? Will you be serious for once? Northern nodded. Fine, I will be. But I'm not including you in my will. You don't need to. I probably have more possessions than you do. He scoffed as they trekked forward. You don't want to see my soul cores. Oh, right. That insane amount of soul cores. Why don't you ever use them, though? Northern got suddenly silent, keeping a straight face. Annette looked at him and smirked. You have a lot of secrets, so you still don't trust me yet. Well, I do trust you. I just don't trust you with certain things. You protected Night Terror and Mr. Fluffy and Ellis. That's a lot for me. She nodded in acceptance. I guess that's okay. Asking for more would be selfish. Both of them continued forward in silence. After a couple of minutes, they were quite far away from the shelter. Annette began. Northern. I'm listening. You've grown strong, she said to him, both of them still walking forward. Thank you, I guess, but isn't it a given? Everyone has grown. I mean, indeed they have, but your growth is outrageous, Northern. That thing in the rift, when it appeared, I had only one feeling. Death. Northern looked at her as he completed her statement. Those were the exact words, the exact feeling. How? Because I have felt it too before in the rift I was entrapped in. Annette frowned. What? You met him in the rift? A quarter of him, actually. I defeated him, or at least I thought I did. But he had been tricking us all along, so I could help him break free completely from his shackles. Annette's mouth fell slightly. That's sick. Yes, and he is terrifying. I wouldn't have done it alone. If I was alone then, I definitely would have died. Then how did you survive? I had Night Terror. He wasn't my monster then, of course. We were in a temporary alliance. Night Terror was the one that killed him. Killing him caused Night Terror to evolve. Fortunately for me, Night Terror's evolution incapacitated him for a while. I struck and killed Night Terror, hence ending the rift. Northern did well to downplay all that he had done, because he wanted Annette to not know of the level of hardship it took to defeat such a monster. It sounded incredibly simple, like anyone would have been able to do it. But Northern knew that not anyone would have been able to do it. Annette also was no slouch. She could tell what Northern was trying to do. After all, she had seen this said Night Terror before. It definitely wouldn't have been so easy even though he was incapacitated for a while. Annette notioned. Northern looked at her. What are you thinking? She smiled somberly. I'm just thinking of how much you would have had to endure alone in the rift. Northern brushed it away with his facial features like it was nothing. Well, I was technically not alone. I had two monster companions, who are with me till now. She nodded. So you unknowingly helped him escape. Then he killed you and came for us. But you managed to make it back from the gnaw of death. I guess we can put it that way. Annette stared at him, furiously. You are not going to get another explanation. Annette, that's the closest to anything you will get. Why are you hiding so much anyway? You don't trust me at all. I believe I already answered these questions. Did you bring me here to interrogate me? Northern's tone was beginning to grow disturbed. No, it's not. I'm sorry. There's something I think we will need your help with. But I am curious about one last thing before I ask. Northern let out a sigh. Ask. What happened between you and Raven? In that moment, Northern's expression became dark. What? You are asking about Raven now? By the look on your face, something serious definitely happened, and yes, I would love to know. Northern was silent for a couple of seconds, looking down. He brought up his head and turned to Annette as he responded. She tricked and used me. Annette raised her brow. I am not surprised. She basically uses everyone. But how exactly did she trick you? Northern's eyes furiously gleamed as he thought about it. After a couple of breaths, he opened his mouth and talked. There was supposed to be a flying ship that could take us out of here. She promised to give it to me if I helped her accomplish something. I agreed, and eventually, when all was done, I had to use the flying ship to save everyone. Turned out that crappy Oracle knew, and if Terrence knew, there's no way Raven also didn't know. Annette's eyes widened. So are you saying Raven already knew that you would use the ship to save them, but still promised it to bring you on board? She was unfazed about it because she knew what exactly was going to happen. Annette nodded, gently touching her chin. That is quite complicated and fearsome. But Northern, I don't think you are looking at this situation quite well. Chapter 418. Time to go back home. What do you mean? I'm not looking at it the right way? Northern frowned slightly as he examined her eyes, waiting for her response. What I'm saying is, have you heard her side of the story? Have you listened to the Oracle herself? Northern glared at her for a couple of seconds before hissing away rudely. What are you saying? Am I supposed to sit down and be like, oh hey, Terrence, let me hear your part of the story about how you and Raven deceived me when you both knew what was going to happen with the airship anyway? He finished with a blank expression on his face. Annette gulped and looked away, forcing a shameful smile. She managed to squeeze out some words. You don't have to put it like that. You could just save it, Annette. Northern interrupted. After a beat, he continued, I'm done with them, all right? I'm done being a useful tool to some damned lady. I can't believe I trusted her with my back at some point. Wow, that must have been epic. Northern grimaced at her. It's not even funny. Why the hell are you grinning like that? Annette wiped the smirk off her face and frowned. Better. Northern looked away. Whatever. He spent a few seconds gazing at the tall trees while Annette keenly watched him from behind. She suddenly moved closer, startling him a bit, but not in a dangerous way. He watched her with a raised brow as she stood next to him, measuring her shoulders against his. Damn it, Northern. Damn it. What? You've grown so tall. Is this the 14-year-old boy who came to the Citadel for the examination? Geez, I'm astounded, really. Northern frowned at the compliment. It made him uncomfortable, and he didn't even know how to react to it. Before he could, his mind drifted to something else. Annette, what month are we in now? Oh, give me a minute. Annette counted on her fingers, focusing intently on them before meeting Northern's eyes. We're currently in the month of Tach, and it seems my 29th birthday passed without me even realizing it. Northern wasn't surprised by what she said. After all, he wasn't even sure if he was 16 yet. With so much happening in this desolation, where every day was a battle of its own, no one could afford the luxury of birthdays. It didn't really matter. But something about Annette bothered him, and it seemed his long gaze was giving it away. What? Annette bellowed. I'm just wondering, if you're 29 and became awakened at 15, why have you only been a master for so long? I mean, look at Raven. She's 18 and you two are of the same soul rank. Isn't that shameful? Annette chuckled, suppressing the sting from his words. You're one to talk. Wasn't your father a master himself? Then both of you were very weak and lazy, I presume? Annette shrugged. Maybe, maybe not. But when you get to the Central Plains and enter society, you'll discover that rifts are more political there, unlike here where you face them in every direction. Northern took one final look at the towering trees, breathing in their astounding height, before looking at Helena. The strong rays of the day star made him squint a bit. Sounds like a lot will change when we return. Annette shrugged, and after a few seconds, she sighed and said, Northern. Oh, here we go. Northern exhaled in exasperation. Dismissing his annoying attitude with a frown, Annette continued, You need to help everyone leave this place. Northern's face darkened as he addressed Annette with urgency. Don't tell me what I need to do. I know what I have to do, and rescuing all of you isn't part of it. It's none of my responsibility. If I decide to do it, it'll be because I want to, not because I have to. Northern, You can save whatever that is, Annette. Right now, I see no reason to want to save anyone. Raven has it all planned out, doesn't she? Then you guys can follow her and rest assured that you're in safe hands, he said, his voice dripping with seriousness. Annette's mouth hung open as he finished. She couldn't bring herself to say anything or stop him as he walked away. She wondered, where the hell is he going? She watched Northern's back disappear deeper and deeper into the forest until she couldn't see him anymore. And he wasn't heading towards the shelter. She raised her head, let out a tired sigh, and then dropped it. I'm really not cut out for this. She groaned a bit and walked back towards the shelter. Annette was back at the shelter. As soon as she entered the main hall, Raven stood up, already waiting for her. Shocked, the Vermilion drunkard paused a bit before asking, Didn't you get any sleep? Raven responded curtly, Sleep is a luxury for me right now. Annette shook her head. The people you're doing so much to send home are sleeping peacefully right now. What do you mean sleep is a luxury? Don't be silly. It's not your fate to save the world. You don't know that. Raven's eyes were sharp. The Vermilion drunkard studied her for a moment and eventually shrugged, concluding that nothing she said would change Raven's mind. Still, Annette couldn't help but wonder what kind of childhood this young girl had. She settled into one of the chairs and crossed her leg on the wooden table. Northern mentioned something about being deceived regarding an airship. Let's leave out the fact that you kept that information from all of us. He seemed really pissed that you and Terrence knew what was going to happen but made a fool and a tool out of him. Raven's brows furrowed. No way, why would I do that? If I knew what was going to happen, I wouldn't have interfered. And even if I did, I would have told him to his face, not tricked him. Right? I wanted to say that, but, I can't really vouch for you and your team. When exactly did Terrence know? Raven was silent, looking down for a moment before responding. It was while Northern and I were in a rift. Wow, you two even challenged a rift together. It must have been quite an adventure. She breathed out in relaxation and stood up. Well, I've tried my best. Looks like you'll have to do it without Northern anyway. We can give you full support and make do with whatever we can. Because you're right. It's time for us to leave this damn land and go back home. Chapter 419, The Cyclopean Barrier. Northern groaned a little as he scaled through the white desert, the wind harshly blowing against his leather armor. He had just left Lothelowin with the mindset of walking to free himself from the thoughts of Annette's conversation. However, he ended up coming across a certain massacre just outside Lothelowin before the river. Northern was sure that he had defeated the monster in the river, so curiosity grasped his mind as to what could have killed these soldiers and why. Not to speak of the crude manner of death. It was undoubtedly a monster. What monster? Northern was even more curious by the time he left the scene of the massacre. There were no trails to follow, no signs that pointed to the presence of a monster except the vicious marks of injuries. Northern trekked forward in hopes of finding the monster, and time slowly flowed, but he only continued forward. Finally, beyond the horizon, just after Sloria, he saw a high wall touching the sky. It brought back memories of the Academy journey, but it was more decrepit compared to the Academy. But make no mistake, this enormous wall was a state-of-the-art beauty. Northern, strangely, decided to head toward the wall. At first, he didn't have any particular plan in mind, but as he scaled the desert, it occurred to him why he was going. It was just one single purpose. His mother. While it seemed reckless and too forward of him on the outside, he knew exactly what he was doing on the inside. Finally, the view of the massive wall stretched out vividly before his eyes. It was an attention-commanding tower, a monolithic structure that seemed to defy all logic and reason. The wall was colossal, stretching far into the sky, its surface a smooth, unbroken expanse of stone that gleamed under the calm and retreating star in the sky. It was as if the earth itself had been cleaved open, revealing this impossible barrier that stood sentinel at the edge of the world. To his left and right, the wall curved inward, forming an immense, bowl-like depression in the earth. It was as if the land had been scooped out by some titanic hand, leaving behind this colossal cavity that dwarfed everything within it. The curve of the wall was so perfect, so seamless, that it gave the unsettling impression of a giant wave frozen in time, poised to crash down upon them but held back by some unseen force. At the center of this cyclopean barrier, there was a narrow fissure, a gate, perhaps, where the stone parted just enough to suggest a way forward. It stood like a crack in the facade of some ancient, impenetrable fortress, promising both passage and peril in equal measure. The gate was a dark metal, almost like a shadowy slit that seemed to pulse with an energy all its own. The entire landscape dwarfed not just Northern but the two fully clad metalists standing before the gate. As they watched the lone figure in the sandscape get closer to them, they tilted their spears forward. Beneath the visor of the armor was a white light that softly burned, leaving a vehement trace in the air. Northern did not mind the overbearing aura that they emanated. Surely, these ones were drifters no less than masters themselves who had been altered through soul-breaking training. Their poses alone were brimming with an outrageous show of dominance. Northern finally got within 10 feet and stopped. The gatemen were carefully observing, with a rigid and fierce light nonetheless. And Northern stood there, unmoving but observing. He covered his head and face with the overflowing clothes of the twilight dawn, so it was quite impossible for them to see his face or hair. The red dust slowly wafted across them as the wind howled gently. Silence settled fully, so did tension. No words were shared, but the message was quite clear. Death awaited either side with one more movement. Northern breathed, looked at them, blue eyes glaring beneath the fold of clothes. Then he moved one leg. Before the leg touched the ground, a flurry of movements that seemed like just a haphazard and uneven flow of light trails happened for a second. Northern was in the air, with both metallic gatemen opposite him. Their claymores were slightly raised behind their backs as they got ready to charge again. Midair. Northern was also flowing in the air, slowly falling as he observed both of them with a slight sneer. "You guys are beneath me, Mr. Fluffy Night Terror." Whoosh! A dark vortex appeared behind each of them. Immediately, they twisted and swung their blades, showing testament to the sharp senses and comprehensive control they had. But such was not enough. Both of them were plundered to the ground by the creatures that immediately flew out of the darkness. Mr. Fluffy landed on one with his enormous size, while Night Terror viciously tore one to shreds as they dove to the ground, his claws viciously tearing through the metal and spilling red blood. Upon landing, Mr. Fluffy bit the armor and vigorously tore it like a savage dog. He continued for a while until there was nothing but splattered blood and an unrecognizable head on the ground. Northern then slowly looked at both monsters as he removed the clothes wrapping his head. His eyes burned with embers of wickedness as black flames licked his skin, leaving deep lacerations as they disappeared. Northern's visage was now that of someone who had been severely injured, rough and barely alive. He ran staggeringly toward the gate and began to knock heavily. "Please! Please! I'm dying, please help! Please save me!" The gate was so thick and hard that no human's knock should be strong enough to be heard on the other side of the gate. However, Northern banged the gate so hard that the gatemen on the other side noticed a slight tremble. Compared to the ones in front, They at the very least wore open-face helmets. They frowned at each other, one saying to the other, "Don't flinch, it is not our place to intervene." With that, both inner gatemen fell silent. However, the slight tremble they felt continued. A couple of minutes later, a man suddenly appeared in front of them. Clothed in a purple robe, both of them bent the knee and greeted, "Welcome, Tower Sage." The man with dark purple long hair, reaching his lower back, narrowed his eyes. "Open the gate." His command caught both of them by surprise, but they didn't hesitate. Immediately, they each went to the left and right sides of the gate and began to turn the wheel behind it with all their might. Chapter 420, City of Gold. The gate slowly drifted apart as both men pushed the lever of the wheel with pained groans. Kneeling in front of the fissure of this cyclopean barrier was a white-haired boy, bruised and barely alive, breathing heavily. Behind him, two monsters were viciously clashing with each other. One was a white, four-legged beast, while the other was an enigma of shadow, bending and unbending like waves of darkness. The man's gaze trembled. It was not what was behind that caught his eye, however. Rather, he was focused on the boy kneeling in front. Those eyes, that hair, he looked so much like. His mind crumbled as he considered the possibility. Not having too much time, he commanded, "Quick, take the boy inside." Both soldiers grabbed the boy quickly. As they did, the two monsters launched forward, running with madness to kill. The man extended a hand and materialized a purple, transparent barrier that kept the monsters away, while the gatemen hastily closed the gate. He cast a solemn look at the fallen and disappeared just as the gate shut completely. By the time he reappeared inside the walls, the boy had passed out. Both gatemen looked at him with respect alight in their eyes. "What do we do? He seems to have incurred so much damage that it's a miracle he's still alive." The man looked down at the unconscious boy with worry etched on his thick brows. He frowned slightly and said to the soldier kneeling to support Northern's body, "Bring him to the tower." At this point, both of them had a little bit of reluctance in their eyes but were hesitant to say anything. Before they could, the man said, "Report to the gate commander about this incident and have him replace the gatemen outside." "Immediately," he emphasized. "Yes, Tower Sage." Both of them bowed as they responded. The one below lifted Northern onto his back and followed the Tower Sage as he walked. Luingard Empire stretched out beneath the golden sky like a tapestry woven by the hands of the old gods themselves. Bathed in the golden hues of a setting day star, this ancient metropolis seemed to glow with a timeless brilliance, each stone and column telling tales of their own. The colossal walls of the palace dominated the landscape, its arches standing tall against the horizon. Below, the streets wound like veins through the heart of the city, their cobblestones worn smooth by the passage of countless feet over centuries. Each road and alleyway carried with it the weight of history, the echoes of chariot wheels, and the whispers of long-forgotten conversations. The buildings that lined these streets were a mix of ruins and restorations, their facades crumbling yet still retaining an air of majesty. The atmosphere was thick with a sense of reverence, a quiet awe that pervaded the air as the man walked within the street. The scent of the earth, warmed by the day's sun, mixed with the subtle fragrance of the population. People stood here and there, the majority of them slowly wrapping up their stalls. Some still had much or less to purchase. The Tower Sage and the soldier behind him cut across several streets to finally arrive at the gate of the palace. The palace before them was the truest marvel of architecture and ambition, an edifice that could only have been conceived by the most visionary minds. Rising majestically at the heart of the city, it dominated the landscape with its towering presence, a testament to the power and grandeur of the civilization that built it. The palace was not merely a building. It was a symbol, a manifestation of divine authority that seemed to reach out and touch the heavens. Its design was a series of ascending terraces, each one broadening as it climbed higher toward the summit, giving the entire structure the appearance of a colossal ziggurat. The base was immense, a solid foundation of stone that anchored the palace to the earth. Yet as the structure rose, it did so with an elegance and lightness that belied its size. The higher terraces were adorned with statues, perhaps of legendary heroes and emperors. Their golden forms gleamed in the light of the setting sun, casting long shadows over the city below. At the very top, the pinnacle of the palace, stood a massive statue of a beast, its figure carved from pure gold and seated in a pose of serene authority. The statue's gaze seemed to watch over the city, imbuing the entire structure with a sense of calm and unwavering vigilance. The beast's eyes, large and inlaid with gemstones, sparkled in the sunlight, as if they held the wisdom of ages within them. The walls of the palace were a blend of white marble and gold, reflecting the warm light with a brilliance that could be seen from miles away. Intricate carvings covered every surface, telling the stories of creation, of battles fought and won, and of the divine right to rule. The carvings were so detailed that each figure seemed almost alive, as if the palace itself was a living entity, breathing with the history and culture of its people. Without hesitation, the soldiers, armored in a majestic mixture of white and gold, opened the gate, and the tower sage entered, along with the gateman behind him. The man could not stop staring around. His eyes glimmered in every direction he turned. Everything was splendid and beautifully depicted, as it was written in books or told in stories by others. The empire was divided into 3 major sectors. This part was the highest of all 3, and there was nothing a commoner like him from the dregs sector should be doing here. Even the gate guards were nobles by birth. After several curves, they finally reached a pyramid-like building situated behind the palace. It wasn't as large as the main palace, but it created a beautiful backdrop. 2 knights clad in golden armor approached the tower sage, bowing their heads. "Tower sage, Prince Razakar is in your chambers." Immediately his face turned dark. "Shambles, take the young man to the infirmary and send this soldier away with some gold." "Yes, Tower sage." The man in golden armor responded with respect and turned to the gateman. "Follow me."